Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, February 12th, 2008 school board meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I guess we know the heat's coming up. Adjustments to the agenda. Alan, do you have any?
Well, you'll be so pleased to hear from me that I have no adjustments to the agenda.
Great. Approval of the January 8th, 2008 school board minutes. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of the January 8th school board meeting.
Thank you, Trish. Is there a second?
Second.
Jack? Discussion, errors, omissions? All in favor? 7-0. Comments by student reps. Do we have? We do. Oh, great. Okay, the middle school student reps.
Hi, my name is Hannah Deneen, and I'm here with Chelsea Wynot as participants for the Middle School Student Council. And one of the things that we're working on is called a fundraiser for Boxes for Baghdad. And it was started by Mr. Solander's advisory, and it was taken over and helped out by the Student Council. And what it is kids are bringing in items such as hard candies, tissues, wet naps, sports magazines, stamps to write home, prepaid calling cards, gum, and other things. And we are sending them to the troops fighting in Iraq. And each student will be writing a letter during their advisory that will be sent to a soldier in Iraq. That one of the soldiers that never gets really any care packages from home. And Mr. Solander will be working on that, so if you have any questions. And then for sports-related stuff, we're starting up swimming, which started on February 5th, and it runs until the end of March, and we have 40 kids participating in it. And Mr. Drake said that it looks like a great year. He's really excited to be working with these kids, and they seem like a great bunch. And then actually indoor track started today, and it runs until the end of March. And there's 80 kids participating, and it goes through the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And the girls' basketball is finishing up. And then we are also starting the MEAs on March 4th through the 13th. And it takes up a lot of the week that we're doing it. And the 8th graders, it takes about 11 hours to finish the testing. And even the 5th graders, it takes about 7 hours. So Mr. Connolly was reading an article, and he said that a sleepy 6th grader will perform like a mere 4th grader. So he recommends a good breakfast and early bedtime. And Chelsea?
We just had a production of Drop Dead Juliet. There was about 25 kids in the production, and Mr. Connolly said that it was really funny, and a lot of kids went to see it too. And also, the 7th and 8th graders are going to have a social, but not a lot of people signed up, so we decided we might try it for the 5th and 6th graders, but we're not really sure since it wasn't much of a success for the 7th and 8th graders. And also, we're having some troubles with the laptops because there was 4 broken screens in 1 week, and student-to-student emailing has been taken away because people are abusing it and sending chain letters and stuff. So they took it away, and we might get it back in the end of March. And also, yearbooks are currently on sale for $20. And there's so many kids participating in the yearbook committee that they had to split the students into 2 groups. And so they switch off Mondays. So group 1 goes one Monday, and then next Monday the other group goes. And there's also a lot of clubs that are going on, including ping pong, knitting, math team, yearbook, speech and debate, computer, civil rights, chess, and drama club. And Mr. Connolly says that kids do better in school if they participate in a club. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the students? No? Thank you very much,
Thank
ladies.
you.
Hudson, did you want to add anything from the high school?
It's been pretty much business as usual at the high school, except for the minor disturbance we had the other day when a small heater blew up in the arts room, and we all had a small run to community services in 12-degree weather, which was awesome, let me tell you. It was great. Otherwise, it's just been business as usual. It's just been normal.
Great, thank you. Comments from the public on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here for a non-agenda item? No, seeing none. We will move on to recognition. First recognition we have is for a middle school student award, and I understand that she's here. The middle school is pleased to announce that 8th grader Emily Muscat earned first place in the middle school division of the Maine Native American History and Culture Essay Contest. This contest was sponsored by the Secretary of State's office. Emily will receive a $100 savings bond, and her social studies class is invited to Augusta for her award presentation and for a special tour of the State House. Emily, would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I wrote my essay on Wabanaki European relations, and so I sent it in, and then about a week ago, Mrs. Roberts told me I won for the middle school division, and I do actually get a $100 savings bond. It's not like a dupe or anything. I don't think the government would do that to me. And March 20th, my 8th grade class is going up to Augusta to look at. Apparently, I'm not quite sure. We're looking at some special Native American treaties that are, I think, original copies. So they're really valuable, and they're not usually. The public isn't usually exposed to them. So that'll be exciting, I guess, and it's a field trip, day out from school, and I'm really excited about it.
And this was done as an extra credit project in a classroom that Mrs. Roberts gave them the option for. And her classmates all benefit from this. And then we had a staff meeting last Thursday. No, what day was that?
It was Wednesday.
It was Wednesday and a half day. And she brought her paper down and read that to the faculty, and then another student read another piece that was done. Great information, very informative, well written. We weren't surprised she won.
Congratulations, Emily.
Thank you.
Steve, is there a way that maybe that could be put on the middle school website for others to read?
I don't know, she might charge us for that, but we can check into it.
Great. Tom, you have a couple of recognitions for the Pond Cove?
I do. Thank you. I think that the DataWise group has been keeping you abreast of the work they've been doing. We consider ourselves really catalysts for the self-improvement going on at Pond Cove. Gary Lanois is on the team, Sarah Simmons, Shire Robinson, and the original group heads, Suzanne Hamilton and Becky Swift is still with us. But along the way, I think because of the work we had done, we had attracted some interest from the Harvard people who started it, and they sent a consultant writer to work with us and provide a little guidance here and there. And because of the work that they had seen there, they decided to feature Pond Cove in Chapter 1 of the latest DataWise book. There are 8 steps in this cycle, and Pond Cove, because we had just read the book and we're starting, Pond Cove was singled out for how to begin data examination and change instruction at a school. We're a little farther along in the cycle. And the reason I bring that up is that the consultant and the people at Harvard were impressed with the whole school, not just the people doing the work. So I thought I would pass that on to you. It's still in the shrink wrap, and anybody who wants a copy can have that. Any questions about DataWise? It's pretty exciting, and the second volume, besides our being in it, has useful tips for us, and we're going to be continuing that work at Pond Cove.
Is the school?
The second, I should say, because I put this up from Sherry Gower, it's in red, white, and blue. I just wanted to point out we got a distinguished visitor at Pond Cove all day today. I don't know where Alan was, but Abraham Lincoln was at school all day today. And everybody tried to wear red, white, and blue. The second recognition is for the staff and all the kids at Pond Cove and the community. I think Rebecca is familiar with the genesis of this project. It came up as a topic at our climate committee. The mission of our climate committee is to promote community and positive relationships in the classroom, the school as a whole, families, and Cape Elizabeth. But we were inspired by Eric Nielsen's video, One World. I think a lot of you have seen that. And just through circumstance and Gail Schmader's work, Gail contacted an international playground representative in Scarborough. They work with third world countries who have little or nothing in their lives and make connections with schools. And we wound up doing a playground project for a school in Haiti. The object of this project was for the kids to look out beyond Cape Elizabeth and Maine, learn more about a different culture. So our contact came, Delinda Carpenter came and did a presentation about a specific school in Haiti. This is the one behind me. That's their playground. It's absolutely nothing. There's absolutely nothing there except occasionally pigs because kids can't go out there. She did her presentation, and the kids wanted to help with the project, and we decided to follow Falmouth's lead and not have the kids just ask for donations, but have them give something up for the playground, to work, to forego having something to walk instead of traveling to the store. And through Delinda's help and a professor at USM who required some of his students to come over and help, we raised $3,000 in 4 weeks, and it's all kids' money. It didn't come in checks. The only $20 bills I saw were the accumulation of 4 weeks' work. So kids went without things, they did chores, they looked on their couch cushions, and they brought in all they had, and we have over $3,000. The ripple effect of this, too, is that our contact will be going to Haiti soon, and the kids have already written letters in French. They'll be writing in English. They'll all be taken down to the school in Haiti, and we have established a partnership with the school in Haiti. So congratulations to everybody at Pond Cove and to the parents for supporting it.
That's great.
Any questions? It's a nice project.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Jeff? Did you want to speak about the High School National Honor Society? Sorry.
Actually, I have my notes right here. This is about, this year the National Honor Society has been targeting its sort of fundraising and charitable events activities to benefit an orphanage in Eldoret, Kenya, which is sort of a I'm not sure exactly what the connection is, but I know that the gentleman who won first place in the Beach to Beacon, this is sort of an organization or an orphanage that he is very much behind, he's very much supportive of. And I think that connection has come in part inspired by some work with the Rotary organization as well. At one point, there had been a hope that some of our seniors would be going to Eldoret, Kenya as part of their senior transition project, again with the help of some Rotary connections, which were very valuable. Unfortunately, because of the turmoil that's been happening in Kenya and in Eldoret in particular, where some of the worst events have been taking place in terms of the violent turmoil there, those students are not going to be able to go to Kenya, but nevertheless they're continuing to do fundraising for this orphanage, which is a great organization. And so far, from various activities that they've done, they've raised $3,325.50, and I think their goal is to match or exceed last year's fundraising on behalf and to benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Last year they raised $4,400, so I think they would like to beat that ideally. So we shall see. But the biggest fundraiser was the dance that they held at Camp Ketchup, but there have been several smaller ones as well during the course of the year.
Thank you. Communication, consideration of leave of absence request for 2008-2009 from Ponco staff member, Alan.
Okay. What I'm going to do this evening is I have 4 letters. The first one is for a leave of absence. I'd like to read each of the letters because I think it's important to read from our staff members. This one is dated January 18th, 2008, and it says, Alan, I request to be granted a year leave of absence for the school year 2008-2009. I am presently teaching my 18th year in the 3rd and 4th grades at Pond Cove School. 3 years ago, with impeccably bad timing, I requested a sabbatical in order to study autism in New York City. It happened to be the year the sabbaticals were eliminated for financial reasons. At this point, I feel I need a year of revitalization, recharging, and recuperation. In addition, the year would give me the opportunity to try to accomplish several hopes and dreams from my bucket list of goals. I hope that you and the school board will respond favorably to my request. And this is from Ogden Williams. And so that you understand, he is requesting a year's leave of absence without pay in order to do this and to take care of some of his bucket of needs that he would like to do at that point in time.
And we need to,
And I do hate to see him go, I should say.
and do you want us to vote on these?
We can either do that, we can do them as we get down to the bottom, if you
Okay.
want to.
All right, we can wait to do all four. Is that all right? Okay.
And the next ones I have are staff retirements. And right now I have 3 of those staff retirements. The first one is dated February 1st, 2008, and it says, Dear Alan, this is to inform you I will be retiring effective July 1st, 2008. I have thoroughly enjoyed my 41 years as an educator in the Cape Elizabeth school system. I have seen tremendous changes in the school system over the years, including 2 moves of the high school to new locations. Cape Elizabeth is the finest school system in Maine, and I'm sure that will continue with your leadership. In my travels throughout the state, Cape Elizabeth is seen as a system they all aspire to be like, both academically and athletically. I have worked for at least 9 principals and enjoyed all of them. I feel we are very fortunate to have Jeff Shedd as a high school now. He has been supportive of athletics and always keeps the best interests of the students in mind. Jeff, along with Troy Henninger, form an excellent team. I have been honored to be the athletic director for the system during the past 21 years and have seen many improvements in the program. These include the addition of girls lacrosse, girls ice hockey, girls volleyball, football, girls and boys alpine skiing, as well as the construction of Hannaford Field. Vic Woodbury and I are the only athletic administrators Cape Elizabeth has ever had. Over the years, we have developed a fine athletic program which I'm certain will continue in my absence. Cape Elizabeth has a wonderful group of coaches, and I hope that you do all you can to retain them. I feel I'm leaving the athletic program in very good situation. I will cherish my years at Cape Elizabeth and wish you all well in the future. And this is signed by Keith Weatherby. Again, one that I hate to read, but I know that time has come. The next letter of retirement is dated February 1st, 2008. Dear Superintendent Hawkins, it is with mixed emotions that I submit my letter of retirement effective June 30th, 2008. My 28-year association with Cape Elizabeth School Department and Town of Cape Elizabeth has been extremely rewarding on both professional and personal level. All aspects of being the Director of Community Services have been near and dear to my heart. Change is daunting, but also exhilarating, and is a time for me to look forward to doing something different with a little less demanding schedule. I also look forward to participating in programs and activities that I have spent my career developing, spending more time with family, as well as watching my grandchildren participate in all they do. I know that community services is in a good place, and the time feels right for me to move on. I wish to thank you, my fellow administrators, my great community services staff, the school board, town manager, town council, and citizens for the tremendous support that I have received over the years. Please let me know what I can do to ensure a smooth transition. And that is signed by Sue Weatherby. Again, a retirement that I hate to see come. I know the next few months are going to be busy years for me, busy weeks for me. The third retirement letter that I have is dated February 5th, 2008, and it says, Dear Alan, I am submitting this letter to inform you that I will be retiring from my position as the elementary art educator at Pond Cove School in June of 2008. Reflecting back on my 30-plus year career as a parent, a teacher, a substitute, and an educator, I am extremely thankful for having had this opportunity. I have had the privilege of working in a school system with the highest standards for academic excellence for their students and the highest standards for professional excellence for their faculty. My husband and I are grateful that we, our children, and now our grandchildren have had the developing years here in Cape Elizabeth. Going forward, I will cherish the memory of these years, experiences, and friendships. And this is signed by Marie Hayes, elementary art teacher at Pond Cove. Again, another retirement we hate to see come. So I have 4 of these here, which when you get to the new business section, we'll bring back so that you can vote on those at that point in time.
Now, do we need to vote on the retirements? I don't think we do, just on...
Probably just the leave of absence? Okay,
Right.
fine.
Okay, great.
One question, Alan?
Yes.
What is the deadline for letters?
February 1st.
Originally, I thought it was February 1st. However, I had to spend some time reading the contract the other day.
Yeah.
And I discovered it is February 15th. So this Friday is the last day in order to guarantee that they'll get the retirement stipend on time. They can retire after that, but there will be some financial implications accordingly. Okay. But I was kind of surprised when I read the contract and saw that date there. And so those are the ones I have today.
Thank you, Alan. Budget meeting schedule update?
Yes. I have just recently updated the budget schedule for when we meet to talk about budget. I was asked this evening, and I want to be sure that it is understood, that each of these meetings is a public meeting, that the public is invited to come to those meetings. There will be an opportunity to speak, but the focus of these meetings will be on developing the budget for the school board, and I'll separate those two out as we go along. That agenda for those meetings is on our website, but basically it is this. On this Thursday, February 14th, St. Valentine's Day, we will have our first public meeting about the budget, and it'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions. I should mention right here, before I go on to the other dates, these meetings will all be held at Cape Elizabeth High School in the library. I made some attempts to have them in the other buildings, but unfortunately, space-wise, it is very difficult to set the room up in a large square, which is how we're trying to do it now, and also have enough seats there for people to come in and ask questions. So in the long run, we decided to do it there. The first one then is February 14th, this Thursday, 7 o'clock, Cape Elizabeth High School Library, and we will begin the discussions at that point. The next week is a vacation week. We will come back the next week, and on Tuesday, February 26th, we will have another meeting, and again, an open meeting where there will be questions asked, there will be some chance for public input, and that will also be at 7 o'clock at Cape Elizabeth High School Library. We will then go to the next week, which is in March, the first week in March. And on March 4th, I think that's right, is that right? Tuesday, March 4th, we will meet at 7 o'clock in the Cape Elizabeth High School Library one more time. That is 3 public meetings about the budget. I have set aside a 4th day in case we need it. I have not scheduled that firmly yet, but we do have a 4th day of Thursday, March 6th, set aside if we need that time. The hope is, in that amount of time between the 3 workshops and the possible 4th, the board will be ready to come to our regular meeting on Tuesday, March 11th, and we'll be able at that point to make some final decisions on the budget and vote for the school board's budget at that point in time. I will say to you that if there is a reason we can't do that, then we will look at what we need to do as far as meetings and other ways to gather the information and put it together, so we will be ready for that vote sometime in March before it has to go to the town council and then begin the next steps in the process.
Thank you, Alan. Steve, middle school visit by town council and school board?
As you'll recall, we had that scheduled earlier in January, and that was postponed. And we bounced around a little bit trying to find a date that would work for as many people as possible, because it's a pretty good-sized group when you put it all together. February 29th, which is a Friday, is the date that we're going to host this. There are two things that I think will be noticeable right away. One is it also happens to coincide with our Spirit Day. It's flashback. Feel free to dress any way you want on that day.
This is flashback to how far?
It depends.
We should all dress as we dressed when we went to high school?
You know, it kind of crosses my mind, but that'd be pretty good. The kids would be looking at us instead of us just looking at them. Then the other thing is because that's the last available prep day for the MEAs, you'll see kids doing work on those MEA release items. And I think for a lot of people, that'll give maybe people the first opportunity to actually see what those kinds of questions look like that the kids work on. Okay? And we'll put a schedule out that'll talk about the different kinds of activities and so forth in advance. So if somebody's interested in catching a writing conference or being part of a literature circle discussion or wants to go into a science room and see a science lab in action or get a look at some of the uses of technology and so forth, we'll try to put a broad enough opportunity out there so that people can select from the things they'd like to see.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Alan,
Yes.
Latin program at the high school.
Yes. You found in your packet several pieces of information about the Latin program, or even more specifically about foreign language at the high school. The first one is a letter which I wrote on February 3rd, 2008. I'm not going to spend the time to read the entire letter, but just to talk about the basics of this letter. If you'll remember correctly, last year about this time, or a little later, and it was a little later because we did budget a little later this year than we are this, as we were in the budget process, one of the many areas we looked at were foreign language. And we looked at Latin because we were looking at the number of sign-ups for the program for Latin 2. At that point in time, as we went through the process and as we were looking at the population of students in our schools and where they were, and knowing that we only had 2 to 3 students who were interested in signing up for Latin 2, we did choose at that point, or the board chose, to cut back the Latin program to only Latin 1. You also gave me the directive that by February of 2008 that we would revisit that program to see where it is now and whether we would be adding to the program and adding Latin 2 to the program. This is February of 2008. And so I have brought it back to you along with some other information for you to consider it. Also, at the same time, I began to hear from some people in the community who are asking about the reason that Latin did not stand alone. But if you took Latin, you would also be required to participate in either French or Spanish in our spoken and written languages. I did some checking to find out what that information was and how it was obtained. And what I have is a brief summary of that, which I will read to you very quickly. And the summary goes as follows. First, French and Spanish begin in Cape Elizabeth in 3rd grade. The vast majority of our students are able to get to level 5 or 6 if they continue with one of these languages. The learning of language to this level is good for 2 reasons. First, it's a great skill and a great intellectual discipline. Second, it's a great college credential. Although we have not been able to push foreign languages as far down through the grade levels as was originally planned, we do not want to build in an incentive to have students drop French or Spanish, where there can be so far in order, did I miss something? Where then can go so far in order to take Latin where they cannot. Second, it has been repeated to me frequently, I do not know if it is in writing anywhere, that the mission of Cape Elizabeth's World Language Program, K through 12, is for students to attain proficiency in a written and spoken language. Latin is clearly not a spoken language, albeit a very valuable course of study. The concurrence requirement is in keeping with this mission. So that's what I had for information. I went back also to last year's board meetings, and I found several references to this. I know one was from Rebecca. You were going to be away, and she left a very clear set of information to us about what your feeling was and about the research that you had done. I also, at this point in time, have brought in a letter from Mart Sol, who teaches our Latin program. And this letter was to you as board members. It was to Mr. Shedd, Mrs. Shapani, and to me. I also have a petition from 19 high school students who are finishing up this year Latin 1 and do want to go into Latin 2. And so I have their petition here and their 19 names with their interest included. I also have attached a letter from Frank Governelli, who I have met, whose son is in Latin 1, and we talked about the Latin program and how it has worked, and he added some questions here that he was interested in getting some feedback on this evening. What I have done at this point is in my fiscal year 2008-2009 budget, because I see a list of 19 students, I have added a period of Latin 2 into the budget process, recognizing the fact that it is the superintendent's budget process, and you will consider that as time goes on. So I bring this to you this evening for several steps. Number one, I've talked with Jeff several times, and I know he has a few things to say about this. I also know there are at least a couple of people out there in the audience who are interested, including Mort Sol and including a couple of parents who might like to speak about it. And so I would turn it back to the chair to make some decisions on where you would like to go with it at this point.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Maybe we could hear from Jeff first, and then we can ask for the folks who would like to say something to the board to come up. Is that all right with the rest of the board? Okay.
First, if I can just make a pitch, either for now or at some point, if it's at all possible. I meant to talk to you and to Alan, Mrs. Ray, beforehand and see if Ted Jordan is here now, and I'm aware of how far he drives in order to get here. And I know there's a business item later on in the session. So I can, if you want me to go forward with the Latin thing, what I have is a short PowerPoint to sort of back up, give some at least context to sort of this discussion. And I could be glad to do that, but but I just didn't want to. I was going to talk to you beforehand, but Ted got here a few minutes late.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
Wanted to move Ted up?
That's fine.
Ted, do you want to move up now?
Come back to Latin.
I think we're going to be a little bit longer with Latin.
I think so.
Okay, is that all right with the rest of the board? Okay.
Okay.
While we blind Trish. We'll turn it over to you, Ted. So Ted we're considering a high school government class trip. Ted has proposed. It's in our packet. It's under new business.
So this is a trip we've taken the last several years, and we're here to ask for your permission to take it again this year. This is for the senior advanced placement government class. And I was reviewing my notes from last year. I debriefed the students after we returned from the trip to try to see what they felt were the strong points and the weak points, and they were very strong in their opinions about how gracious and generous our elected representatives were in taking the time to talk to us. And so we've lined that up again this year. We're trying to make it, as we do every year, more than simply a tour of the city, but to actually meet as many elected officials or members of the media and bureaucracy as we can, so that students can have a real deeper understanding of how the government works. So that is once again the plan.
Ted, I am going to ask a question, and I didn't give this to you beforehand, but I've had several questions, not necessarily about your trip, but about trips in general who leave the state and go away for a few days. And those questions have really revolved around, how do you plan with students for what they're going to do while they are there, and how much free time do they have, and how much active time do they have in doing the tour? Again, I want to be really clear that this is not a question specifically about your trip, but it seems to be a question I hear more often, and so it's a question I will ask each person who's taking a trip from this point on.
Sure. You're right, Alan. It's important to balance that because students can burn out. Usually in the morning through early afternoon, we have some rather intense meetings with members of the government or the bureaucracy or members of the media. What has worked very well for us is to combine that with either a less intense visit to the museum or the monuments on the mall, or just simply walking, just to get them outdoors and have them a little chance to debrief, to talk about the things we've just seen, and to give them a chance to just unwind. And that has worked well for the previous 4 or 5 times we've been down.
And what happens with them in the evenings while they're there?
In the evenings, we usually go out to eat together, and then we just kind of, the chaperones and I, one other member of our staff and her spouse, we have a suite, and so oftentimes we'll have them in and just talk about the day's events and what we're planning for the next day. And again, that has worked really well. The combination of the intense meetings in the morning and the afternoon to have a little bit less intense activities, as well as just talking about group dynamics, as well as the actual speakers we've just heard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
I don't know if anyone else has questions.
Any more questions for Ted? No? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the AP government trip to Washington, D.C. in April.
Thank you, Trish. Is there a second? Thank you, Linda. Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for letting us move you around a little. Okay, back to Jeff.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can make the psychedelic stuff disappear. I don't know if you want to stay there, or if you'd like to move. This is... Okay. Okay, first of all, I will tell you that the only globe picture that I could find in the PowerPoint format happened to be of the Americas. So that's what I put in there. If I had more time or taken more time, I could have found some Asia, some Rome, some Italy, some other things as well. But I want you to know that I just dealt quickly with sort of what I have, being more concerned, I think, about the substance than the sort of the picture of it. But what I'm trying to do with this is, it's actually been interesting for me, because in the last couple of days, sort of thinking about what to do, I've done a little bit of research myself and found some information that I was unaware of, and I'm sure the board is probably unaware of as well. So I wanted to give sort of a little bit of historical perspective, some facts about the pattern of students taking language, K through 12, but focused on the high school, in our high school, to sort of give some context for the discussion, the decision, and so that people can see where we are right now. So Latin at CEHS. First of all, to acknowledge that Latin has been a great addition to our curriculum. That is really not the issue. That is behind what I've inelegantly called the concurrence requirement, meaning the requirement that you have to take French or Spanish in order to be able to take Latin. And so that's really not the issue. But Latin returned, I think I've got this right, in 2002, 2003, and it has been on the book since then. And we're absolutely glad that it is. The students perform really well on the national exam with Mort's instruction, and that's fabulous. They learn history, culture, vocabulary, and grammar that are clearly important roots of Western civilization. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that the value of Latin is not in question in terms of any of the discussions or decisions that have taken place up until this point. But I think it is important, as we think through, and as we thought through back in 2002, 2003, how we handled the issue of the return of Latin to the curriculum. And it was a return. It's not the first time that Latin has been in the high school curriculum. Is to sort of get the sense of the bigger context of the foreign language system in Cape Elizabeth. Because it is, in my view, it is a strength of the school system. And that is sort of the concern about wanting to, whatever we do, not make any moves that would in any way undermine a real strength of the system. Students start French or Spanish in grade 3. They are able to start Latin in grade 9. All students have the opportunity to get through at least level 4 of a foreign language, depending on where they are placed coming into the middle school and then where they are placed coming into the high school. But all students have at least that opportunity. Most, if they continue to take the languages that begin in the elementary school throughout their school careers have the opportunity to get through level 5 or 6. That's not all, but it's most. It's a sizable percentage of the students. Sharon Merrill, who works in our guidance office, is a tremendous archivist, and so I went to Sharon the other day and said, do you have anything that explains what the program, when the move was made in Cape Elizabeth back in, all I knew it was sometime in the early 80s or the mid-80s, to sort of move towards a K through 12 program, and particularly moving foreign language down to the elementary school, sort of what the goal was, what the vision of what was hoped to be accomplished. And this is just some quotes that I've taken out of the materials that Sharon had in the file, that Dr. Pelletiers, who was the superintendent at the time, his goal was to develop a foreign language program so effective that 85% of our high school graduates are fluent in a second language. And to attain this goal, the ideas were to attract more students to foreign language study, provide a longer sequence of language study, and encourage students to enroll in advanced classes. So that is a summary in a report that appeared on March 2nd, 1988, that was made to the school board at that time by the FLES committee. FLES stands for, and I didn't know any of this stuff before I started putting this together. FLES stands for Foreign Language in the Elementary School, and that is the committee that resulted, whose encouragement and recommendation of the board and then the support of the board led to the addition, the bringing down of foreign language into the elementary school. I believe the original vision was to hope to bring it down to at least grade 1, if not kindergarten, and I think that effort has not sort of pushed that far, but we still do better than many, many schools in terms of where we start. Then there was a report that was done in 1997 that was sort of a report from the foreign language teachers to the school board about how the FLES program had worked in Cape Elizabeth. And these are just a couple of blurbs. I have the entire reports if you care to see them. But I took a couple things. Our language program acknowledges the importance of language and culture. We want our students to develop usable language skills and to perceive themselves as successful language learners. We want to enhance our students' interest in and acceptance of cultures in our country and the world. And then starting a foreign language in elementary grades permits an extended sequence of language learning necessary to develop fluency and prepares students for travel, work, and living in a diverse global society. Now, what I take out of these documents in terms of looking back historically about what the mission of the Foreign Language Department is, because I've heard it explained to me in the past, but I had never seen it in writing until I sort of began to look at the archival documents about why it was done. I've heard in the past that the purpose of the mission, the primary mission of the Foreign Language Department, K-12, has historically been recognized as developing kids, moving kids as close to, if not to the level of fluency in a spoken language. And at some point there was a decision in connection with this that French and Spanish were the languages that were chosen to sort of be used as the vehicles for accomplishing that purpose. So, actually, as I looked at the statistics, we don't quite reach Dr. Pelletier's goal. But I thought I would share with you some statistics about where we are in terms of the foreign language program. Keeping in mind, as I say in the bottom bullet here, that there is no foreign language requirement at all, either in the state of Maine or in Cape Elizabeth High School, or in most high schools across the state of Maine, as far as I am aware. So there is not one. But really, if you asked our students, some of them would be surprised to learn that there is actually not a foreign language requirement, because it has become such an expectation that it is virtually a de facto requirement for students as they go through the school. To the point that when their course selection sheets are done and that sort of stuff, there is a sort of a pre-programmed slot for foreign language. What are you going to fill in there? And kids expect it, because they've been taking it since 3rd grade. But here are some numbers. 92% of all of our students take at least through level 2. So a very tiny percentage do not. 80% take at least through level 3. 63% take at least through level 4 of a foreign language. 60% of our students take language all 4 years. I was actually a little bit surprised that that number was not higher. So I looked back before I came here a little while ago and just counted through the juniors to see how many of our current juniors are taking what I was looking for, how many of them were taking French or Spanish. And the numbers were 94% of all of our students who are not attending paths are taking either French or Spanish at whatever level is appropriate, depending on where they are at that point. So there is a drop off from junior year to senior year. That's actually a little bit higher than I expected to see. 43% of our students get through at least level 5 or 6, obviously in French or Spanish, because those are the languages, because those are the ones that begin in grade 3 that our students can get to level 5 or 6 in. And again, keeping in mind that there is no foreign language requirement at all at the high school. Okay, so here is the inelegantly phrased concurrent language requirement. And it basically is this: in order to take Latin, what we have said ever since it was reintroduced in 2002, 2003, is that you must also be taking French or Spanish. The reason for that, and that's been in place since that time, and I'm also told by the gentleman who was the curriculum coordinator back when Latin was originally in existence at the high school, is that was a requirement that was in place at that time as well, in its initial sort of genesis. Which doesn't mean that it needs to last forever, just because it's been there so far. But that's what's been in place since Latin's been at the high school. Okay, so why do we have that rationale? It is not, as I see it, an anti-Latin rationale. It's not intended to be in any way to devalue Latin. What it is intended to do is to discourage kids from making decisions which will take them off the track, which they begin in grade 3 in Cape Elizabeth's system, because the school board and the town council supported moving that down. It is to discourage them from getting off that track and moving towards fluency in a spoken language, for all the reasons that the 1988 and 1997 reports suggest. And to keep our students as competitive as they possibly can be in the college admissions process. That is the purpose. Now, there would be another question raised about, if should Latin have been included in the initial decision to go down to grade 3, because that would sort of change the discussion. It would raise the issue of Latin as a sort of a spoken language, or Latin as a language that isn't currently spoken versus other languages that are, which was certainly a part of the original mission statement as I read them as well. But that issue, I think, is not really particularly joined by the facts that we have here, because the ones that begin in French in grade 3 are French and Spanish. And we have taken the position to do the concurrence requirement to keep kids moving towards fluency, consistent with the original vision. All right, so let me give you some other information. First of all, my understanding of what colleges want, and the information I get from our guidance counselors is the same information that I've heard from the other guidance counselors at each of the other 2 schools that I've been at. I think it's probably much the same as the information that the guidance counselors in most high schools would understand and would give based on their experience with working with college admissions. And basically, what I think most guidance counselors would understand is that students, first, the most important thing in terms of foreign language is to get students as far as they can in a particular foreign language. And second, to get them to take as many years of foreign language as they can. But not necessarily second to the exclusion of the first. The first thing that, at least from what I have heard from guidance counselors everywhere I've been, is get as many years of foreign language under your belt in a particular language as you possibly can. So what I've done is I asked our guidance counselors to sort of put together to see if they could arrive at some understanding, so it's not just that it's taking it from me, about what their understanding is and what their common advice would be to kids who are facing possibly the application process to college, particularly, but not only for students who are interested in applying to competitive colleges, which most of our students are. And so this is something that the 3 guidance counselors, who don't always agree with one another, our guidance counselors, sort of come up with as a series of statements about foreign language and college admissions. So this is their understanding that because Cape Elizabeth students begin language study in grade 3, most of our students enter high school in Spanish or French 2 and 3, or 3. This positions our students to complete 5 or 6 years of language study in high school. The advantages are 4 years of one language are required by competitive colleges. 5 and 6 years of language study is a very powerful credential and permits our students to compete with private school applicants to competitive colleges. The 4th year of language is an honors course, and the 5th and 6th year courses are AP courses, which contribute to a student's weighted grade point average. So far what you've heard in the first 3 bullets are just sort of the credentials aspect of what the guidance counselors at Cape Elizabeth High School say, and that the 4th, 5th, and 6th year of language helps to make our students fluent in a second language, and this is a significant benefit to our students who will be working in a global world economy. And I think that last bullet sort of speaks to the original mission, although it wasn't necessarily directly tied to it. And I do have to say that when we were talking about the return of Latin several years ago, it was not the Foreign Language Department that was the major pusher of the concurrence requirement. I think there is perhaps some misunderstanding or misassumptions about that on some parts. It actually was the guidance counselors, and is the guidance counselors, who are the most in favor of it, and have historically been in favor of that perspective. Okay, so that's what colleges want. Now, it is with some trepidation I'm going to show you some data now about what prepares students best for the SATs. And I'm going to show you this data with some trepidation because it's been cited, and if you Google Latin and SAT preparation and things like that, you find this data very frequently cited about Latin as preparing students well for the SATs. And here's the caution that I want to say. First of all, I want to acknowledge that, of course, it does. Because of the studies in the root words and that sort of stuff, the cognates that come out of Latin, and because the SAT continues to be, although it touts itself as a reasoning test, it is still a very vocabulary-rich test. And there are vocabulary sections on the test. There is no question that Latin, a study of Latin, is beneficial to students who are preparing themselves to do well in the SAT. But I also want to just put a caution out there about what I would call a sort of a self-selection fallacy in some of the data that gets thrown out there, because there's no question that there is a correlation between students who take Latin and higher scores on the SATs. The self-selection question you always have to keep in mind when you look at that data is, are the students who take Latin more naturally inclined, or does the study of Latin attract a certain type of student who is more likely to do well in the SATs regardless? Again, not to discount that Latin does help on the SATs, because there's no question it does. But I want to take a look at some of the data. This is from the College Board Total Group Profile Report 2007 College-Bound Students, page 8. You can find this in a report. I've got the entire thing if you'd like to see it. What it shows is that students who take Spanish do least well on the SAT, 503, 512. Now, does that mean that Spanish causes them to do less well on the SAT? No. It's a self-selection issue. Kids who take French do better, 530, 532. Now, the data that you have in this book, and I don't think we can go any deeper into it because of the way the students, because this is all data that comes from bubble sheets that kids fill out as they're about to take the SAT. So all this says is that the students are reporting that they are taking Spanish, French, Latin. They don't report how many years of a foreign language they're taking or that sort of thing. But Latin students clearly outscore French and Spanish students, 564 to 562. That's a very significant jump. The interesting thing, and I think this gets a little bit to the degree to which that jump is an issue of self-selection versus the issue of, Latin preparing kids well for the SAT. Kids who take Chinese score less well in the reading section of the SAT, but they significantly outscore the students who take Latin in math. I doubt very much that kids who take Chinese learn a lot of math through Chinese, although it probably does take a certain amount of mathematical thinking as I begin to learn about some of the complexities of the Chinese language. You can certainly see a connection. Hebrew, if you go straight by the data and sort of made some conclusions based on correlational data, if you really wanted to increase your SAT scores, you take Hebrew and you 564 and 569. It ties Latin and reading, it slightly outscores it in math. Now here's the interesting data to me, which I think is consistent with the preference that we've had to sort of push kids to take as many years of a particular foreign language as they can. And again, understanding that this is still self-selection as part of this process as well. That fallacy is in all of these numbers. But students who take more than 4 years of any foreign language, regardless of what foreign language it is, outscore Hebrew, Chinese, Latin, French, and Spanish, and kids who get to the level of AP and honors significantly outscore everybody else. Now, AP and honors in our system, the way we've organized it, is level 5 and 6. And so I think that to the extent any of this data is significant, I think it's consistent with Latin kids outscoring French and Spanish, but it is also consistent with the desire that we've had to push kids to get as many years of a foreign language as they can to move towards fluency, which is what Dr. Pelletier was trying to do 20 years ago. Okay, now the data that you saw in the previous slide, that was national data. This is Cape Elizabeth High School data. This is our students from 2006 college-bound seniors. We don't have the 2007 report yet. I'd be glad to share that with you when we get it, but it shows a consistent trend. Our Spanish kids outscore the national Spanish kids, but they are outscored by our French kids and they are outscored by our Latin kids. But what we need to understand is because of the requirement that we have about concurrence, all of our Latin kids have also taken French and Spanish. And kids who take AP or honors, which is level 5 or 6, outscore everybody. And then if you take greater than 4 years of anything, then in high school, then you get to that. Significantly outscores everybody. There's no question, the more foreign language kids take in high school, regardless of what the foreign language is, they do better on the SATs.
Actually, just a quick question.
Yep, sure.
Is that AP honors in 4 years supposed to be reversed? Is the AP honors supposed to be the 658 and 665?
No.
No, it's
Yeah, it's confusing initially, and I think what it is see, because again, remembering this is Cape Elizabeth High School data, the kids who are at AP honors level in Cape Elizabeth High School get there in 4 years. Okay, in other words, their 4th year, they're either in level 5 or 6. The kids who take foreign language for more than 4 years, and it's a fairly small percentage. This is not probably a statistically significant number. It's 10 to 15 in any given year. Those kids have probably gotten to level 5 or 6 in the base foreign language, plus they have taken something else as well. Either they've taken French one or Spanish one or the other language. So that's why I think those kids tend to outscore the kids who have just taken through level 5 or 6. Does that answer your question, Kieran? Okay. It is on its face kind of unusual. If we drop the concurrence requirement, here's what would happen. The guidance, even if the concurrence requirement were dropped, and I am not here to strongly fight that it must stay there, but I do want people to understand that there is a rationale for why it's in place, and I think it's a strong educational rationale for why it's in place. What it's intended to do, it is not intended to discourage kids from taking Latin. It is intended to encourage kids to take as many years of a foreign language as they possibly can. Our guidance counselors would strongly encourage all students to go as far as they can with one foreign language. Okay? I am confident, and I would say it as a school principal, that it is a mistake for all of our students not to take French or Spanish, or whatever other language we eventually go to if we had other languages that start in the elementary school. It would always be a mistake for kids to get off that track in 9th grade. It would always be a mistake for kids to get off that track in 10th grade. And I believe that for most of our kids, it would be a mistake to get off that track in either 11th or 12th grade as well. Now, there are some kids who do get off that track beginning in 11th grade and a few more in 12th grade. And is that a reason for thinking about the concurrence requirement? Is it too blanket? That's a legitimate question, and something that is certainly worth considering. Most students, I think, because we have fairly persuasive guidance counselors, and I think they know their stuff, I think would take the advice of guidance counselors and continue on that track, regardless of whether they decided to take a second language, whether it was Latin or Mandarin. I was about to say Manchurian, and that wouldn't be right, or some others. Some would not is the concern. Okay? How many would not? I don't know. And one of the reasons I want to be sort of as forceful as I possibly can be tonight in terms of understanding the merits of not getting off that track is if we go to the point of abandoning that formal requirement, I don't want to go on record or anybody to misinterpret what that step as suggesting that it is a good idea to drop a foreign language before they can get as far as they possibly can and be successful in it. Because the concern is that some would not listen to the guidance counselors. And frankly, one of the concerns about why that is particularly acute in Cape Elizabeth High School, although one would think it would also be as very acute in Yarmouth and Falmouth, and they do not have this concurrence requirement, I acknowledge right at the beginning. But one of our concerns is to the extent that people believe that taking Latin significantly increases SAT scores, as opposed to being correlationally associated with increases in SAT scores, is that that might be a particular reason in this community, which is very interested in college acceptances and high SAT scores and things like that, that people might get off the track for that reason. And that would be a mistake. And I just want to have that, in my opinion, it would be a big mistake. I'm almost done. So this is the last slide. I think the options are keep the current concurrence requirement. I've got to come up with another name for that requirement, but that's what I'm using tonight. Drop the concurrence requirement and add language to the program of studies. I have looked at programs of studies in Yarmouth and Falmouth and some other places, and that requirement is not there. And there is some language that they have there to try to encourage kids to get to the level of fluency, to keep going with a language that they begin earlier in their school careers as far as they can. Frankly, I don't think the language there is quite strong enough. If we were to go to that concurrence requirement, I would hope that if the board directs me or gives some strong advice to consider getting rid of that requirement, that you will give us some time to sort of play around with some language if we're going to go in that way. Or to keep the concurrence requirement and add some language to the program of studies that says, you know, we have this requirement, but it's not an anti-Latin requirement, because it's not an anti-Latin requirement. People interpret it that way, and I understand it, because that's the only other language that we have, and there is no other similar requirement in the high school, and I readily acknowledge that. But to add some language in the program of studies to say that taking Latin or taking as many years of foreign language as you can is absolutely a benefit for everybody, for every student. It's good for college admissions. It's good for intellectual preparation, academic preparation. It's good for being able to function in an increasingly global world, which is what the folks recognized a long time ago when they pushed us down to third grade. So that's my background. I hope it's not too long-winded. I hope it's helpful. My guess is you might want to hear from some other people first, or I can answer questions now, or whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Thank you, Jeff. You obviously did a tremendous amount of work and a lot of prep for this, and gave us a lot of information. If people have questions for Jeff? Yep, Karen?
I just wanted to ask you, because one of the things that I keep on hearing in the letters and stuff that I'm receiving is this scheduling. So let's say concurrence is the option we select.
Yep.
It seems as though the way that the schedule works, and I know that scheduling is usually a nightmare of some sort, often it can penalize those kids or make it impossible for them to do both simultaneously. So I guess my question to you, could you explain more the reasoning, or if we could improve the flexibility of the scheduling to be more supportive of doing it concurrently, if that's what we decide?
Yep. If somebody, I am very open to, I mean, I've done scheduling in any number of different ways. I've scheduled in high schools where there's hand scheduling by the guidance counselor and the principal, and you have a big board and you try to juggle things all around, and then you run it through a computer to see how that works, and then you go back and you play around with it another way. I've done it with 2 different computer programs where the kids, you just load, and that's what we do at the high school right now. You just sort of load up all the courses, and basically there's a word I'm looking for. There's a
Algorithm?
An algorithm, yes, thank you. There's an algorithm that is sort of built into the software that attempts to meet the needs of the greatest number of kids to be able to fulfill the greatest number of their requests. And that's basically what we do. There is some option to sort of give priority to assigning certain classes. Typically what we do with that is classes that are usually only singletons, meaning there's only one section of them, and where there has historically been sort of a difficulty of getting into those classes. That's usually, or where there's usually a high intensity demand. In other words, if kids are squeezed out of it, typically those are things like senior AP courses, things like that. There's not too many of those priorities we assign. Pretty much, we do tend to assign it. I don't think we even assign a priority to senior level classes that are particularly catered to seniors. I don't think that there's a better way to do it. I mean, we could assign a very high priority to Latin over, lots of other classes. The effect of that would be that those kids would be bounced out of something else. We actually have, we try to be a small comprehensive high school. And I think I mentioned that last year. That was sort of a theme when I was talking about the budget, and I think I've put it in my budget documents this year that you haven't had an opportunity to look at as well. But we do try to be a small comprehensive high school, and it makes scheduling difficult because for a school of our size we offer a lot of things, and we offer a lot of singleton courses in particular. Singletons, again, are just courses where there's only one section. So if the kid's schedule doesn't work that period, then they've got to make some decisions. So scheduling is a little more complex here. I think actually Power School is the best scheduling program that I've seen in terms of the way that it works. We typically, there are percentage reports that Power School gives to us as we're building the master schedule and loading kids into it, and basically it comes up to about 97 to 9, well, maybe a little bit lower than that. I think it's about 93, 94% is sort of my recollection in terms of the number of requests first time around that the program is able to fulfill, and that's pretty good for a school of our size. We do have an 8-period schedule as opposed to a 7-period schedule, which is what a number of high schools have. Not all, but certainly a number. That gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of scheduling. I did see, I talked to Frank Governale the other day, and I had a good conversation, and I know in his email he was talking about PE and whether there's any possibility of doing something with the PE requirement. I researched that issue last year, not because of Latin, but because of some other issues, and I sort of went through the chain of command up in Augusta and ended up with the answer that it is illegal to give students credit for any number of sports teams that they might participate in lieu of PE. So that one at least is not closed. We can look at a technology requirement, but I don't think we're in a position to be able to do that for next year. If that's something that, I think that the reason I throw out the technology requirement is because it's one that's been under discussion. It is one of the few that is sort of not required by the state. And if somehow that was played around with, somehow it would free up student schedules a little bit. I don't think it would make a great deal of difference, but it would give a little bit of freedom in the schedule compared to what they have right now. That's sort of a long-winded answer to your question, Karen. But,
And then Jack.
no.
I'm sort of hearing, or I foresee that this issue isn't going to go away with Latin because we're considering Chinese.
Correct.
And we don't offer Chinese in 3rd grade.
Right.
So I know there's a subcommittee discussing that. I mean, how does that factor in? I'm hearing that the strategy is the same,
Yep.
and you're endorsing the strategy, and I'm guessing that the Foreign Language Department endorses that strategy.
I think here's what would happen. Yeah, the Foreign Language Department does, but again, really, the Foreign Language Department is not the major advocates of the concurrence requirement. They think it's a good idea. They believe that what they teach is very important. A number of them were involved way back when David, well, maybe it was only David Peary in particular was a part of the committees, I believe, that led to sort of the creation of it, pushing it down to grade 3 in the beginning. And so they absolutely believe in sort of the mission of the school, and that's the mission of the foreign language program, so they support it for that reason. The more vocal people who support it are the guidance counselors. In Chinese, the similarity between Chinese and Latin, and it's a very good question, and I've given it some thought. I haven't arrived at a decision about it because I'm not forced to at this point. But the similarity of it is exactly as you say, that there's no real thought that we're going to be able to start it in grade 3 and have some kind of parallel structure in Chinese. The question is, does the fact that it's a spoken versus a non-spoken language make a difference? The whole point may become moot if we do away with the concurrence requirement anyway, which again I want to say very clearly, I'm not here adamantly supporting that we must have it, but I am adamantly supporting that whether we keep it or we don't keep it, we understand the rationale and we make it very clear to our parents and to our students that they make a mistake if they get off that track of fluency. So there are differences and similarities. There are probably more similarities than differences. Okay, Trish.
Jack?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say, Jeff. First, I just heard last night for the first time that there will be a language requirement by the state, beginning with class 2012. It's a language requirement.
Yeah, okay.
Susan Gendron has a little dog and pony show.
Yep,
She
I've
does,
seen it.
yes.
I've seen it.
Okay. Secondly, fluency was clearly one of the important, if not the overriding objective here.
Right.
I don't know how you define fluency. Is there a simple definition that you and guidance counselors use for fluency?
Not me or the guidance counselors. I know there is, and I can't quote it to you, Jack, but there is a commonly understood definition of fluency, I believe, among foreign language teachers nationwide. There's a national, I'm going to forget the acronym, but there is a National Council of Foreign Language Teachers that I believe works with colleges and high school teachers, and they do define fluency at a particular level. I mean, I think we tend to associate fluency, but probably not quite there really at sort of level 4, 5, or 6, particularly 5 or 6. And the Foreign Language Department does do a pretty good job. I think it does a very good job, better than most of our other departments, at sort of tracking in a fairly systematic way the skills that go into kind of advancing through levels of proficiency in foreign language. I could get that information for you. I'm confident.
Well, one that piqued my curiosity when I saw that was, in my own case, my two daughters went to a school system that was very much structured like Cape Elizabeth. They were introduced to foreign languages in elementary school. And by the end of their sophomore year in high school, they were fluent enough that at the beginning of their junior year, they could go on an exchange program in a foreign country where they easily spoke, in their case it was Spanish. They lived in Venezuela that beginning of their junior year, went to school, spoke Spanish, and so they had achieved that level of fluency quite comfortably by the end of 2 years in high school. So that's piqued my interest.
Yep.
Along with that, I know back then that at least the talented and achieving students were told that an option for them was to take 2 years of one language in high school, 2 years of another language in high school, and that would prepare them well for college too. That's just an observation. Third point I'd like to make is that, as you know, I'm somewhat neutral on some of these questions, but I am very curious about this whole thing. And I went to about a dozen websites for high schools in Maine, and about a dozen websites in Massachusetts. I could not find any other school that has this concurrence requirement. But even more than that, I could not find any other school that assigns a difference in value to a classical language as opposed to a modern language. Every website I went to, including the state of Maine and the state of Massachusetts, treats a classical language, which is either Latin or Greek, as having equivalent value to a currently spoken language. So both state education departments treat them equally. And when I went to Maine and Massachusetts high school websites, I was going to the best schools.
Right.
I wasn't going to the low-down schools. I was going to all the best schools. None of them had a concurrence requirement, and they all treated classical as having equal value with current languages. So to me, I don't know what to make of Cape staking out this position so uniquely. There's no support for it anyplace else.
You've researched more schools than I have. I've taken a look at several schools, and I haven't seen any that have the concurrence requirement either, Jack. I would agree with you about that. I know the state of Maine learning results don't distinguish between classical and modern languages. I don't know if other high schools do or not. I haven't researched that as much, but I certainly know that the state of Maine doesn't do that. I guess the question is to what extent you want, I mean, if we want to revisit what is the mission of the foreign language K through 12 program at Cape Elizabeth, I think that's really the question, and whether or not there is sort of seen an added value of being able to actually come out with the ability to speak a foreign language in a culture. To me, that certainly has a certain amount of common sense appeal, that in addition to getting the discipline of learning a foreign language, that you can actually go out and speak it in some places. Again, that's not to diminish the value of Latin, but because I think it's an incredibly valuable thing. I'm a history teacher, and I recognize the important roots that both linguistically and historically that Latin, the teaching of Latin, the learning of Latin will sort of reinforce. So it's a great program. Whether I would say that it's, you know, to students growing up in the 21st century, it's quite as important to sort of learn a language that isn't spoken. I'm not sure. And what I don't know is, and I think it's hard to sort of think about, is my guess is that most of the schools, that even where there is not a differentiation between classical languages and spoken languages, and this is a guess, and I don't have any data to support this or not, that I would bet that in many of those schools, the kids who take Latin are also taking a current language as well, and that the reverse is probably not quite as much the case. But that's only speculation, and I don't have any data to support that, Jack.
I don't argue, I mean, it's a subjective value judgment, some of this, and I don't argue with what you presented here at all. I agree with 90+%, but on the other hand, I think a position is being staked out here that's very, very unique in the world around us as far as both the state of Maine, the state of Massachusetts, and the best schools in those two states. And I understand from at least one communication that many of the best colleges would treat a classical language equivalent to a current, modern spoken language too. So I'm really very reluctant for us to stake out that position like that. I would strongly encourage our students to pursue the direction that you've identified up here, right, because I too believe in the value of that.
Right.
Yep. On the other hand, I'm not sure that some of our more talented students would lose much, and this is a question that I don't have the answer to.
Right.
If they were very fluent at the end of 2 years of high school in a language and then switching to another language, maybe not even Latin, maybe 2 years of French, 2 years of Spanish in high school, I don't know.
I will agree with you. I mean, I agree with much. I don't think this is sort of an argument, but because I know, I have it somewhere in my pile of materials, that if you go to some of the more competitive colleges, you're absolutely right. They look for sort of, a lot of them say essentially 4 years of a classical and modern language. That's what they're looking for, for kids to sort of have to get in. I guess I would just say that the issue is, and this is sort of begging the question and avoiding the issue to some extent, but also saying that there's a bigger piece of it than just Cape Elizabeth High School. The issue is where we have a 3 through 12 system where there are only 2 languages that start on their way up. In that circumstance, is there a particular value to getting to fluency, regardless of the debate between classical languages or modern languages? Because I don't feel so strongly about that. Because language study of any language is going to be incredibly valuable. Absolutely.
Trish?
A couple things. From a practical standpoint, and I'm sure you can't give me the answer now, but the kids that are currently in Latin 1,
yes,
can they get into Latin 2, assuming we keep it in the budget, without an issue? That's my first question, and I don't know that you can answer that tonight. Because my second question is, I like a little bit of what you said about, we're looking at Chinese, we're updating our strategic plan. Does it make sense for the foreign language department to weigh in on what its mission is? And to then, if we can solve the immediate problem of the scheduling for these students that are interested,
yep,
not make necessarily a decision on the concurrence, and look at the bigger picture in terms of foreign language. We're going to be coming up against this as we're saying, you know, like the shift happens, we're going to keep coming up against this. I don't know that this is an isolated decision, so I would toss that out, that perhaps maybe as we're updating our strategic plan, and the foreign language might want to weigh in on this, what is the mission? Is it time to reevaluate that?
Right. And I think that's a good question. I will say, I mean, I can say very confidently that if really 19 students sign up to take Latin 2, you know, in the context of, you know, all the course selection processes we're going through and sort of counting up their requirements and that sort of stuff, if 19 actually sign up to take it, yeah, it'll be able to be scheduled. Can I guarantee you that every single kid will be able to get it scheduled without, you know, without making some decisions? No, but the same is true of some science classes they might want, or some math classes or whatever. The big issue in terms of, you know, being able to bring Latin 2 back to life, which I support, we were going to offer it this year regardless, is not the scheduling. The issue is, do the kids see their way into the schedule to be able to actually take it? Now that obviously connects to the concurrence requirement, particularly where I believe that the majority of the kids, I didn't actually count them up, but I think the majority of the kids who have signed that petition, I think, are going into their sophomore year. I think there are some who took Latin 1 last year and have skipped a year and want to do Latin 2. But I can tell you that those students will hear from guidance counselors loudly and clearly that they should continue as long as they can in French and Spanish, and then think about taking Latin 2. They won't hear anything bad from the guidance counselors about Latin 2, or from me, or from anybody else.
Rebecca? You forget your question.
I'm wondering if I want to still ask it. If college is looking at students' transcript, if they have foreign language through level 4, which you say most of our students are completing sophomore year, is that correct?
Most of our students, I would say junior year.
Junior level 4.
And how, yeah.
They're completing it.
Not all, but most. Yep.
Most of them are completing it their junior year? Or mine?
Some at the end of sophomore.
Some before, but not all.
May I ask something?
There are a small, I don't know these numbers, I can get them for you. There's a tiny handful of kids who are the least foreign language interested, gifted, whatever it is, who do start in level 1, even after grades 3 through 8. Some of those kids are kids who have switched in grade 6, and so they haven't had. But most of the kids who come into the high school are starting at either a level 2 or a level 3. And I think the biggest chunk actually start in level 2, I believe.
Karen?
I like the idea of perhaps the foreign language department revisiting the goals and the mission, but I'm a little concerned because my understanding is that Latin is not part of the foreign language department. So one of my questions to you, why is Latin not part of the foreign language department? And then my other question is, we have 19 kids signing up for Latin 2. What's the probability of perhaps them signing up for Latin 3 and Latin 4? And reading one of the letters from, I think it was Frank Governale, that's also considered a good, it would fulfill the requirements of the more competitive colleges.
Absolutely it would. Yeah, there's no question that it would.
And if and when we revisit the goals and the mission of the foreign language department, obviously making it inclusive, include Latin, include Chinese, or whatever it is we decide what direction we want to take as a district. The realities of that, I'm not sure what the realities are with the scheduling, but I would be curious to see how schools of our size with similar student populations that we consider, like some of those schools that Jack must have been researching, how they juggle it, how they handle it, how they fit it into the schedule, what they offer and what they aren't able to offer, just as a comparison. So
I think it's worth looking into. I mean, there are probably obviously some budgetary considerations if we were to go to level 3 or level 4. I guess my only caution again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record about it, is that the kids who can get, if theoretically we had Latin starting in 9th grade and we offered Latin 1, 2, 3, 4, taking that would fulfill the requirements, the sort of on-the-surface requirements that competitive and very competitive colleges have for kids to get in. The kids would be better off getting to level 5 or 6. And that would be level 5 or 6 of Latin, level 5 or 6 of Mandarin, level 5 or 6 of anything. They would be better off getting a level 5 or 6. I want to skirt a little bit the issue, if I can. I'm not quite sure. You asked, why is it that the Latin department, the Latin class is no longer a part of the foreign language department, and I think that gets into some questions that I'm not sure I would feel really good about discussing in front of the board about that in public.
Any other questions for Jeff?
I actually just wanted to
Yeah.
toss out one more comment, sort of piggybacking a little bit on what Jack was saying about how we structure foreign language and, how many years to reach fluency and at what age. One of the things I brought up a while ago is maybe offering Latin in the middle school, and that might be just as much of a scheduling nightmare, but if people want a year or two foundational Latin, sort of all being put on your shoulders, and perhaps there are other ways we could approach this creatively without necessarily plunking Latin into high school, but just some food for thought.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Sure.
We'll reserve the right to ask you more questions.
I'll be right there. Okay.
Now, I think maybe there's some folks that would like to speak about the Latin program. If there are, if you'd come up to the podium and just let us know your name. We'd love to hear from you.
Hello, I'm Frank Governale. I've got no specific prepared remarks, sort of reacting to the questions and the comments that Jeff made. I think you probably all saw the letter that I sent in, so you know how important I think Latin is to studies. I guess my credentials in that respect is I've got two sons in the high school, both take Latin. The senior's taken the most advanced level of AP, it's French, but has also done independent study with Mortzal in Latin. So as a family, we support it. I guess the most important point I'd like to make tonight, because I don't think I need to make the point that Latin's important, I think you've heard that message already, is that we should get rid of this concurrence requirement. I don't want to disagree too vociferously with Jeff because I respect everything he does, but I think it's patently unfair and it's completely unnecessary. The kids who are taking Latin do well in SATs, I don't think necessarily because of Latin, although you can make that argument, it's a self-selection issue. These are the most ambitious, talented kids in the school. Of course they're going to do well in the SATs. They also are ambitious and very well informed about what it takes to go to a competitive college. They're not going to drop French or Spanish. But if they choose to drop French or Spanish, and they're well informed, and they've been warned by the guidance counselors, and their parents have been involved with their course selection, which I think most have been, that's a prerogative. It's their prerogative. It'd be unfortunate for them to do that, but it's a prerogative. My guess would be that the vast majority, if not 100% of these kids, would not drop a French or Spanish, and therefore it is unnecessary. I guess the other point is we can't protect our kids from absolutely every bad decision. If this is the worst decision they make in their life, that's pretty good. The other points I'd make is that, and it's in the letter, but it's not been stated yet, every peer school in our area offers full programs of Latin. And I say peer, Falmouth, Yarmouth, all of them. I think it's very unfortunate we have one single session of Latin, and that perhaps introducing it in the middle school would be a good way of improving the program. I'm not sure, but it's unfortunate that is the case. As it relates to the comments from the guidance counselors, just two observations. I did call the admissions offices of about a dozen schools, half Ivies, half not. Actually, none of them actually require a foreign language. They strongly recommend it, and I think it's an important element of an application, but it's not absolutely required. And also, as I think Jeff said already, Latin is accepted. It says fulfilling that requirement for 4 years, not 6 or 7 or 8 years, but 4 years. Secondly, on the fourth point of that sheet that Jeff passed around, the comment is about in the global world we need to have foreign language in the schools and the kids being fluent. Well, if that is a key element of our objectives here, personally, we should drop French today and start Chinese. There's about 80 million or 90 million people in the world who speak French as a first language. If we're going to be realistic and practical about it, that is, that's really where we should be going. And I think, as Trish mentioned, this issue of concurrence is going to come up with Chinese. And and if we're going to stick with concurrence for Latin, and even suggest we're going to stick with Chinese, that is a major mistake, and one which will, I think, undercut the credibility and success of the Chinese program. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, please come up. Thank you for hanging in all this time.
My name is Randy Ballenbach. I have a ninth grader in the high school. I also just want to talk about this issue of concurrence, and I've had some communication with some of you about this. There's an incredible assumption built into this model, and I said this in an email, maybe it was to you, Jeff, that the assumption is that somehow taking Latin will reduce the desire, the interest, the numbers, the something of taking French and Spanish. And I think this is this assumption that they're negatively correlated, that for these kids, if we just look at these kids, somehow the ability to take more Latin will reduce the likelihood that they're going to take the 4 years of French and Spanish. My first point is that I don't think that we have any real data that tells us that. And while this is really anecdotal, this isn't statistical, I will say the ninth grade kids, who I think are the majority in this class, this being Cape Elizabeth, of course, I know all those ninth grade kids. Every single one of them is a kid who would take 9 years of Latin and 9 years of French or Spanish. That's kind of what that population is. So if anything, let's just say there's no correlation. Maybe it's a positive correlation. Maybe the ability to take Latin, which is related to French and Spanish, in fact, would increase that likelihood even. So I find that part of it, that's been laced into everything that's been said. And I think it's great, and I think I'm not an educator. I just take as at face value that foreign language is important, 4 years is important, that colleges regard that as important. I take that as a given. But I don't think we should assume that that not having additional requirements would reduce the likelihood that kids, or increase the likelihood that kids taking Latin would therefore not take French or Spanish. And if somehow what's sort of unsaid in that assumption is that it's a scheduling issue, and therefore they just couldn't fit in 2 languages, many of them could. I mean, if you have a kid who doesn't play an instrument, that child could. You have time to do electives in school, and this is just one of those electives, and I don't understand why we're making it harder to take the elective of Latin. And I would also say that I don't know a lot about the state of education in Maine or how it was decided that foreign language is not a requirement. But it seems like everyone thinks taking a foreign language for 4 years or through the AP years is great. Why don't we just if we could do that, why don't we just require it? Why use Latin as sort of the tool to do this? So I really think the concurrence thing is sort of an odd thing, a little bit of an inappropriate thing, and in a way sort of a redundant thing, as I think we all see that. I bet you that in most cases, the children who have enough interest to take Latin are already going to be taking as many years as possible of whether it's French or Spanish. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Anybody else? No. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Huggins. Excuse me, I'm Ward Solon. I teach Latin. I just want to make a few points. First of all, we do have an outstanding foreign language department at the high school, K through 12. It's terrific. We have obviously a strong lobby, 6 Spanish and French teachers at the high school, 6 at the middle school, and because the guidance department also is pushing for as many years of one foreign language as is possible, and they should. And they should. I just want to make a couple of points. I'd like to put to rest forever this idea that people take Latin to improve their SAT scores. I mean, we actually do more than that. Granted, we work on vocabulary and we work on sentences, but I've heard so many times. I learned my English and Latin class Latin class it's a working thesaurus. We always work on the right translation at the right time. Also, if you look at the goals of our school department, you see it talks about developing knowledge, behavior, skills, and attitude, and those are nurtured daily in Latin class. Also, the mission statement talks about a dynamic school system, and I believe the more classes we offer that can nurture our youngsters, the more dynamic we are. 19 people have signed up for Latin 1, but you see as many signed up for 19 have signed up for Latin 2 for next year. But keep in mind, the year before last, just as many signed up for Latin 2, and when I arrived to teach academic year 2006, 2007, there were 5. And I think if the school board found that out, it would have been cut immediately. And of course it was. It was later on. And now the Latin department is reduced to 1. The concurrence regulation, it's not having an impact on Falmouth, which has 6 classes, Freeport, which has 7, and Greeley, which has 5. If we were to have 6 Latin teachers at the high school, we too could, take people through the Aeneid, through Cicero, through everything. You are the voice of the people, and you have 19 people signed up for Latin 2. And I'd like to teach them Latin 2 next year. Any questions?
Thank you, Art. I'd like anybody else?
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Just one other thing. I can't believe that 1 year of Latin 1 is going to have much impact on a college admissions director. We have some good students taking Latin 1, and 2 years of a foreign language, 2 years of Latin would look exceedingly better than 1 year of Latin.
Thank you, Mort. Is there anybody else that wanted to say anything about Latin? No?
I'd like to ask Jeff a question that came to mind based on what Frank said, which I hadn't thought about it until he said it. Frank reminded me, I knew this already, that for many, if not most, of these colleges, foreign language is not an absolute requirement. Now, you've made the point, and I agree with it, that competitive college will look at a student who's gone to level 5 or 6 in a foreign language very favorably, because he or she has taken some challenging courses. But I wonder, and based on past experience, I wonder, and I sort of lean a certain direction on this, if a student gets to level 3 or 4 and then said, well, I want to take some other challenging courses. I don't know what's offered at high school right now. I'm interested in science or engineering, and I'd like to take a differential equations elective. And so I'm going to drop French 4 for that. I don't think a college would mark that student down for that choice at all. Colleges are interested in the good students taking very challenging courses, maybe the most challenging courses they can find. And that's an equal trade-off, I think a college would say. The college doesn't have a requirement for language.
Some do, at least the ones, I think the things that I have from Dartmouth and Harvard and some other places that Sharon gave to me, I think it's more than strong recommendations. I think it's.
Some do, but I don't think it's 5 or 6.
No, you're right. I didn't say that I saw any that are 5 or 6. It's not a question of what do they write, it's a question of what they do in the college admissions process. And the question is, and in an increasingly competitive environment, I think what they do and what their requirements are, most kids who get in who have gotten beyond the requirements. The examples you posed, Jack, I don't disagree with. I mean, if somebody got to 3 or 4 and wanted to dump, not get to 5 or 6 in a foreign language, but take something that would be clearly recognized as at least as much of a challenging course as the next foreign language, the examples that you gave, absolutely. I mean, I think that they would be very interested in that. Whether starting any language, dropping the ability to get to 5 or 6 in a language in order to start any language, whether it's Latin or another or something else at level 1, whether that would be considered in the same light, I don't know. I want to repeat again that I am not here to strongly say that we must have the concurrence requirement. If the board decides that they don't want, most of the kids, and I agree with the comments, I have no doubt that most of the kids who are signed up to take Latin would continue to take French and Spanish and continue to go as long as they do, because their parents are well informed about that. And to be honest with you, I spent more time than I probably should have to go through this, because at least it will get out in the press and that sort of thing, that I hope, regardless of what the decision is, that people begin to recognize, and I think most people in Cape Elizabeth do, but I don't think all do, recognize that getting as far as they can in a given foreign language is in most cases, the vast majority of cases, a requirement. I have a lot of respect for Frank, and I've worked with him and his kids for a number of years, and so there's no strong disagreement there either. And to be honest with you, I have a bit of a libertarian, anti-paternalistic streak in me. So again, in terms of philosophically, we are being a little bit of big brother when we say that this is a decision that we think is a good decision for you to take. We can say that without the concurrence requirement, and we will. We'll just have to work a little bit harder to get that message across. And I'm not vehemently opposed to it. I am just concerned about some kids who won't listen to us and will regret it in the end. We'll just have to work harder to make that, to educate them around that, because I do think that the requirement has a very strong rationale behind it, whether you support the requirement or not.
Rebecca?
Jeff, I have a question, and then I have a couple of thoughts. If we drop the concurrence requirement and a student cannot make Latin and a foreign language, the other Spanish or French work at the same time, so they elect to take Latin for that semester, or I don't know what you call them.
A year.
A year, for the year. So they're committed to it for the whole year?
Yes. These are all year-long classes. They're all year-long classes.
Okay. Then they go back to French or Spanish the next year. Is that...
Yes, they absolutely could, and some might choose to do that. Obviously, their study has been significantly disrupted. And, the example that was brought up in terms of the kids that I'm most concerned about are the kids who they play an instrument. They intend to do that for 4 years. As a practical matter, given the other requirements those kids face, much as I'd like to think that it wasn't the case and that we could open the schedule up and accommodate all the requests that people want to have, I think there's going to be some tough choices that people have to make. And I can just say that if we get rid of the concurrence requirement, I'm going to be advocating very strongly for, and I know the guidance counselors will as well, continue to take the language that you can get as far as you can possibly get it, that's in the vast majority of cases in your best interest. And I don't think that the board is necessarily, even people who are questioning that, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that philosophically. Or it's not a philosophical issue, it's a practical issue. It's an educational issue, but it's a practical issue too.
Did you have something else, Rebecca?
I do, because it's not on new business.
Right.
So I'm not sure if we're even supposed to be making a decision tonight on this.
No, not necessarily. I think it was more of an informational
Just an
gathering.
informational.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was thinking that we would maybe send it back to Jeff for some additional planning and some thoughts on,
But if you want to give, I'm open to, if you have some advice you'd like to give or some wishes you'd like to informally express, I'm open to that.
Can I just then complete with some of my couple of thoughts then?
yeah, go ahead.
I really struggle with this a lot because I can see both sides, Jeff. I think both sides have made really good arguments. But I do feel as if at the point of high school, how much of a role we have to be in terms of Big Brother,
Right.
and whether that's really appropriate. And I do think that you've got an excellent staff that can probably put together a very cognizant argument in various formats to convince students and parents alike that it's in their best interest. And if they choose not to, then it is their decision, and the repercussions one way or the other will happen. I don't know if it's really our place to do that. But if we do that, I know that the argument here is that we want kids to be able to take more in Latin. And the concurrence is kind of keeping them from doing that, I think. I'm not sure. Because sometimes the arguments are flip-flopping a little bit. But there is a budgetary issue here that I see. It's looming large. We are a small district. And as everybody knows, we continue to work in very difficult financial times. So what is going to give? Or is everybody here and in our community prepared to continue to increase our investment in our schools so we can increase the choices for our kids? So, you know, I think that there's some multiple steps here that we all have to look at. And my last thought is, this is as Karen, I believe, or Trish, I'm sorry, said this is a larger issue about foreign language in our district. And I would really encourage us to go back to our staff, both Mr. Sowell and our guidance counselors and the foreign language departments, to kind of have this discussion and come back to the board with an update, because I guess this exercise really hasn't happened for quite a while. Unless,
A major review? No, I don't think it has.
so perhaps it's time for that to happen, so we can really, as you said, catch the right wave. Do it right. And obviously you're never going to get it perfect, and we're going to have to probably twist and turn screws here and there, but I would urge us to not leap too quickly, give our staff and administrators some time to really fully discuss this. But I don't see why we should be preventing parents and students from making these decisions. Not preventing, well, yeah, we're preventing.
Right. Right.
So, Jeff, would you be comfortable in going back to the foreign language folks and having a more in-depth conversation and then come back to the board with a recommendation? Is that something that the board is willing to entertain and wait for?
My only concern is that it appears as though that decision has sort of been made, is what I'm hearing, and they're in agreement that perhaps it's a good idea, or is that not the case? I mean, I don't want to send it
They
back.
agree that it's a good idea, but I have to say, I mean, nobody sees this as a life or death issue to the foreign language department or the guidance department, because we recognize that most parents are going to listen to us, most kids are going to listen to us in terms of their advice about what's the right thing. The hard case is the kid who has some other things on their schedule. That's the hard case, where some hard decisions are going to have to be made. And as I said, I mean, if we get rid of the requirement, and I can certainly talk to the foreign language department and guidance department about the possibility of getting rid of it, and how do we sort of systematically sort of educate people so that the decisions they're making are at least informed decisions. I really saw this meeting as an opportunity to begin that educational process. So that's, yeah.
Kathy, I have one more question. I just want to be clear. So perhaps where your concern is not so much with foreign language, an exodus from foreign language, but rather an exodus from other classes, like music, like art, like...
Yep. It is not just a foreign language issue. This is not just a foreign language issue. But again, I think if we can educate people the right way, because most kids would be ill-advised to stop music as well. It is another kind of a language that disciplines the mind in a whole different set of ways, And if you want to look at correlational data in terms of SATs, it's very highly correlated with very, very strong SAT scores as well. But again, that's also self-selection. But I can certainly go back and try to work on some other language. I'm getting a sense from the board that there's enough of an interest in sort of revisiting the concurrence that we should look at some other possibilities. If I'm misreading the board, then
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, is what would you like to hear from the board tonight? I don't mean specifically, but do you want some kind of a straw?
That would be a help.
For what particular purpose?
Would the inclination be
the concurrence?
On the concurrence thing. That's what it is.
All right.
You want a sense of the board, perhaps? Is that workable?
Yeah, is that what you're...
That would be a help.
Okay. Jack, you want to go first?
Well, yeah, I was going to make...
Can we be brief?
Yeah.
First of all, I think we should separate the budget question from the concurrence question, because they are two separate issues. Secondly, I'd like to see, however we get there, a decision on the concurrence thing made reasonably soon, because I think many families are in the process of thinking about their kids' schedules for next year in high school studies, and concurrence requirement really has been an influencing factor in those decisions.
We have to make the decision quickly because, to be honest with you, we're printing the program of studies next week.
Okay. So, Jack, you're...
So I have a parallel libertarian feeling point of view that Jeff has, and I would be strongly in favor of removing the concurrence requirement.
Okay, thanks. Rebecca?
We're moving.
Kathy? I would be interested in looking at the removal. Trish?
Ditto, I like that middle of the road one you put in there with the freedom to do the language.
That's it.
Karen?
Removing.
Linda?
Removing.
Peter?
No comment.
Okay.
I like
Hudson? Sorry.
I took up to Spanish 3, and then I was encouraged by my guidance counselor to go on to Spanish 4, but I chose not to because I was, as a student that's interested in the media arts, like video production, journalism, and things like that, it was not in my, I did not feel that it was in my best interest to, in order to go into the field of, the career field that I was interested in, to continue that when I could take all these other electives that I've been trying to get into, but because just, seniors get preference and everything that I really hadn't had the chance to get into. So I'm thinking of a student who, perhaps like me, is interested in something along those lines, but also is interested in, perhaps Latin or something like that. And I can't speak on behalf of the rest of the school because I don't know what they think, and I haven't done any homework on asking other student opinion. But I think that it would be in the best interest of the student body to remove the concurrence requirement as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Jeff, for all your work. Okay. Report on energy. Ernie? We've had you sitting there all night. You probably have a long way to travel.
Sorry.
Good evening.
Hello.
I was asked tonight to give a brief overview of the energy management program. I'll try to keep it under 2 hours. I do have a lot to say.
No, go ahead for 2.5.
Any questions? No. What I did here to make it simple on me, because I like to be just as straightforward as I can, and please jump in at any time during this process to ask any questions, or if I touch on something that you might be interested in, just speak up. The current energy management program and how it works. It's a software program which allows the user to monitor all areas of in this case, the school facilities, to make sure that the various mechanical, electrical, lighting systems are doing what they're supposed to do. And it also allows us to set schedules based on the use of the facility for, again, lighting, heating, and so on. And one of the important things of all energy management systems, it takes a certain temperature of water to heat your facility during a day. Like, for example, today was around 13 degrees. It took 200 degrees of hot water to heat our system. So the boiler maintains 200 degrees based on the outside temperature. As it warms up, that loop temperature drops down, and of course that's a savings in energy. And that's all programmed into this system to allow for those adjustments to take place automatically. So as it warms up to 40 degrees, you're now down to 160 degrees temperature to heat the facility, and so on and so forth. And it goes one step further into the variable speed drives, which regulate the velocity of the water movement through the pipes. The colder it is, the faster you want to move the hot water through the pipes, and as it warms up, you don't need to move it so fast because you don't need the BTUs. And these are large, up to 30 horsepower motors that if you can slow them down, you save energy. That's all designed into this system. So it does save energy that way. The school system started with the basic energy management system. From the best that I can determine was in the early 1990s. When I came on board in 97, 98, what I started to do was to focus on what is the system doing, what can it do, and where best to spend the taxpayers' dollars in terms of improvement. And what we decided to do at the time was to take a look at the various pieces of equipment that are managed by this system to ensure that we're getting the most efficiency out of those systems. We weren't. And over the past, well, since 98, each year I have come to you with requests for monies to improve on system performance. And over the years, and I'll give you some numbers as I get to the end of the report, we have brought in the state-of-the-art equipment. We're now a completely digital type system where before everything ran on pneumatics, which involved running a large air compressor, chasing leaks throughout the facility, because if you lost air pressure, then everything would go into full heat. And you got literally miles of rubber tubing going through the facility, and unless you have excellent hearing, you don't hear it, period. I mean, it's kind of a, turn everything off and see if you can hear an air leak, With electricity, which we have now, everything is digital, you just put a meter on it and it lets you know if it's getting from point A to point B, and it's certainly more efficient and easier to maintain. The system that we have in the high school is sophisticated enough that we've added on to it a number of town facilities. And just to give you an idea, that we currently manage the high school, the middle school, Pond Cove, Town Hall, Public Safety, Thomas Memorial Library, Portland Headlight, Community Services, and Public Works. All these facilities are on the town, are on the school software program. It's a Barbara Coleman Network 8000 system. And each morning when the crew shows up, they go in there and they go to each facility to make sure that the system is in tune and is doing what it's supposed to be doing. If a piece of equipment is not operating the way it's supposed to operate, or for some reason shuts down, blows a fuse, whatever, we get a pop-up on the screen that says air handler number 1 at the middle school is out of service. And it'll try to reset it. If it doesn't, then we know that we have to send a tech out there to take a look at it and reset it. So we're ahead of we're ahead of ventilation problems a lot sooner than if we waited for someone to say, gee, it's awful stuffy in here, or we're cold, or something like that, because we get instant reports back from the field as to how the system is operating. The cost of these systems varies from a basic system like for Town Hall here, you're going to invest around $6,000 to get into it. Then as you add points to it, the cost goes up, but the payback also goes up as well. The school has invested a lot of money over the last several years, like I said earlier, just bringing things into meeting today's standards. And so in terms of startup, we're there, we've done that. This is money that is now well spent, and we're actually saving money from our investment, and payback, of course, is down the road. I can't tell you how far down the road, but it's in seeing distance. It's not that bad. And some of the improvements we've done over the year have had less than a year payback. Some have 2 or 3 years, but there's always a payback, and and once you get it, then it continues. So I mean, it's really proven to be a wise investment. Are all energy conservation devices connected to the computer software program? No. We do have a number of things that, like variable speed drives, and that should be connected to the system, but the payback is probably going to be longer than if I invested it, or we invested it in another piece of equipment. So as we bring everything to the point where we can get the most out of the system, then we'll be addressing whether or not we should be adding these drives and stuff at the system. That, you know, not a lot of money, but it's money better spent somewhere else at this point in time. And a good question I have here is, if a system should fail during off hours, we have a number of backups. We have alarms that we can send anywhere we want to send them. We have lights on all our facilities that, should a boiler go down, on top of our schools, there are yellow strobe lights that will go off. Police will call us, someone will come in and take care of it. So, so that helps out a lot. And for those buildings that are on the system, more on the town side than the school side, we have low temperature alarms hooked right into the fire alarm that I had installed over the last several years. The fun part, what is the estimated oil savings for the school department? Although the cost of energy is soaring, we've been able to control our energy use demand for all oil and electricity. We have maintained a consistent yearly use average, even though our demand on utilities has significantly increased. This is important. We have added air conditioning, we've added field lights, we've added tremendous use impact of our facilities for different programs and meetings. You look at our schedule at the high school, and the place is like, oh, it could be open even longer than it is, but it's a full day. It basically 7 to 9 at night throughout the whole facility. That I've seen that demand of use of the facility increase significantly over the last several years. Yet we're maintaining a consistent level of utility use. So even though we have slight increases, the demand has significantly increased. The computer systems, all the computers that we bought for Pond Cove in the high school, they plug those in at lunchtime every day, and you can watch the kilowatts just climb, okay? So what we've done, it's scary. I mean, whoa, you know, who's paying this month's bill? But seriously, what we do to address those types of issues is we have a load shed program. And what that does is we know what we'd like to see our peak demand be during a given time in the day. So we set our program to say that once the high school, for example, that's set at 205 kilowatts hours. When it hits that, it's going to start turning things down, turning things off. And let's say we shut off the heat to the second floor. Now, I don't want to scare you, but what it does is it shuts the fans off, and they'll stay. That'll give us more energy to charge the computers, but it'll shut the heat off for, I have it set for 6 minutes. After 6 minutes or so, that one will come on, it'll shut off another area. So we have like 10 areas or 12 areas in both facilities throughout. And we don't necessarily have to shut something down in the middle school. We could shut it off at the high school. They kind of work together because everything comes through the middle school meter. On oil savings, I looked at the last 8 years. In the last 4 years, we've saved an average of 5,000 gallons a year, and over the previous 4 years. So in terms of gallons of oil, over the last 4 years, we've saved approximately 20,000 gallons and an average cost of approximately $40,000 in savings for oil. And Pauline was nice enough to run some numbers on kilowatt savings. And over the last 6 years, we've saved 417,000 kilowatts. That's a lot of electricity. And I had a meeting today. They've come out with new high-density fluorescent lighting for like our cafeterias at like the middle school. We have 400-watt metal halide bulbs, which are, it's a lot of energy consumption. They turn them on at 7, they go all day. They have fluorescent lights now, which will do the same thing and save us 130 kilowatts, I think it was, per fixture. When you add that in the gyms and things like that, when you've got 100 of these fixtures, there's some significant savings to be had. That some of that cost to put things like that into play is in this year's budget for lighting upgrades and things of that nature. But all in all, even though the cost of energy is really, it's hurting everybody, we've maintained a steady peak and been able to stay within our projections each year, which is, in terms of use, which has been very helpful in preparing the budgets that you have to deal with. Any questions?
Have you considered I don't know what they're called, I know they have a name, but the switches that turn lights on when somebody, motion detectors?
Yes.
For rooms, for classrooms?
Occupancy sensors.
Thank you.
And we have put several of those in. We put some in the boys' locker room at the high school. Some of the bathrooms have been done. And I'm right now looking into putting in sensors on our main corridors that tune into, that's not the right term, but daylight lighting. So if there's enough daylight lighting, then all the lights won't come on, but as the daylight light diminishes, then it will turn on the rest of the lights. I'm also looking at the possibility of, all our circuitry is such that this can be done fairly inexpensively. In the hallways, let's say you've got 30 fixtures, you've got 2 switches turning them on. Instead of turning off maybe heat in this area, I'd like to be able to cut the lighting back first, and then if we still need to bring the peak down, we can switch over to, ventilators and those types of things that draw a lot of energy in order to bring down the cost, the use actually.
Thank you. Other questions, Vernie? Jack?
Yes.
Two parents commented to me that, and I'm remiss I didn't ask the right questions of them, but they said the schools are too warm. I don't know what schools they were talking about, so I didn't ask that question. But
right.
How do you monitor the temperatures in schools?
Each classroom has a sensor that we know the temperature of every classroom throughout all our facilities. And there's 2 ways we control heat. One is we have a main unit heater on the roof. And that maintains in the ductwork going into all the classrooms whatever temperature we set. We keep that at about 65. And then each classroom has a heat recovery coil so that if that classroom needs more than 65, that coil will heat that classroom. What happens, and the reason that you have these differences in temperature is in a high school, we're dealing with a building that pretty much is not insulated. The only insulation in the facility is in the roof. And in the budget this year, I've asked for, I think, $16,000 to convert the unit ventilators so that we're not bringing in so much fresh air And by doing that, we'll be able to minimize or only bring in what we need based on CO2 levels. So what happens is if you have, you're bringing in this extra cold air, if you would, the heater, in order to compensate for that, has to increase its temperature to meet the discharge. And so you don't have that steady comfort level. It's either all of a sudden it's hot or it's cold. So once we can get a better handle on these older units in the high school classrooms, that will improve.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing is we have, as you know, we all know heat rises. So in some cases, as you go through the facility, just because of the natural draft of the facility, in the high school especially, balancing is a big issue. And it's also a $40,000+ tag to have somebody come in and balance it. So we have been, when we have these unit ventilators done, in order to install these, they have to balance them. And that money is better spent doing it that way. But you're right, there are pockets throughout the facility that's either, you know, it's never what you want it to be. It's either a little bit too warm or a little bit too cool. But overall, we're pretty good shape.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ernie? Linda?
So if you're not bringing in fresh air, are you recirculating?
We are, you're always bringing in fresh air.
Okay.
But when they designed these systems back in the 60s, they said you needed so many cubic feet of fresh air based on student population.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule of thumb was 25 students, and they would come up with a fixed number. So you're always bringing in that fixed number, that amount of fresh air. And you really need the fresh air to better reflect the actual CO2 levels in the classroom, which is generally much lower than what we're bringing in with this equipment in the high school. So by dropping the CO2 level, or knowing what the CO2 level is, we can bring in enough air just to address the need for that classroom, not charge the room, if you would, with fresh air.
Okay, but, so you are utilizing a recirculation of the existing air? Is it going through?
Yes, but again, you're always bringing in makeup air with it. We're bringing in too much makeup air.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you know,
You do
I think I'm
recirculate the
finally.
air, but you always have to add, you know, makeup air as you're doing it. We're at right now, with that type of system, adding too much makeup air. That's why we want to do the CO2 census.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I can't help but just think about the wellness committee. It's okay that it's okay that, I mean, we are definitely still getting in fresh air. We're not going to compromise the CO2 level for this. I mean, obviously, I know you're not trying to poison the kids.
No.
When you say fresh air versus cold air versus.
You're not getting any air. No, when I say fresh air, I mean that we maintain the level required by indoor air quality standards. The middle school has had these in now since they renovated in 94, 95. And we're looking at maybe 15,000 gallons a year less to heat that. And we're pretty close to the same square footage for the two facilities. And if you don't need it, then don't waste the money, so.
What's that? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Always like to hear your reports. Technology report, Gary and Jack? I think we don't have enough circulated fresh air here at this point. No, we won't eat it.
Sorry.
I'll try to give you a brief overview of
technology. It's my annual report for the school board. Okay, we're up to speed here. Just for those of you that don't know, the technology department has a staff of 4, myself and 3 technicians, and we are a town school department. We deal with the 3 schools, community services, town hall, police, fire, public works, Thomas Memorial Library. So we deal with all of the entities in the town. We have a lot of people, a lot of computers that we're dealing with, and feeling a little stretched with some of the increasing use of technology, as you'll see here in a minute. The work that we've accomplished this year, or the work that we've been dealing with this year, just I wanted to highlight some things, some of the things that happened this year. High school teachers got new laptops through a state program, much like the middle school program. That was supposed to be, or rumor was that it was supposed to be a precursor to maybe doing a one-to-one program at the high school, but we all know that the state is kind of in a tight budget situation, so that who knows if that'll happen. We were able to, through our budget, get Pond Cove teachers, or not, maybe like 2/3 of the Pond Cove teachers' laptops through the regular budget process. We couldn't do it all at once, but those were the teachers with the oldest computers in the classroom. Those were also the teachers that didn't have laptops. We had them 5 through 12. That was the one school that needed that work. A big part of technology's work is NWEA testing. NWEA testing is done on computers. We use the labs. In some cases, it varies school to school, but in the high school, for example, we set up enough computers so that we can test the entire 9th grade, about 150 students or so, all at once. In other schools, we test them in chunks of time. But we test grades 3 through 9 at the beginning of the school year. That takes a good 4 to 6 weeks worth of time over the beginning of the school year, and we will also do that again in the spring. It's a valuable, I think it's valuable data, but it takes a lot of the technology staff time to get things up and running for that. We have now opened the Power School portal, K through 12, opened up the high school right after Thanksgiving, and it was relatively uneventful. Things seem to be going okay with that. We do our regular upgrades to certain labs, and we've been continuing with our data work. A big part of last year's work was working on the technology plan. The state requires that we have a technology plan and get submitted to the state and get certified every 3 years. Linda Winkler was on the committee. We spent all last year writing this. We based it on these 7 goals, principles that we actually found from the National Technology Plan. And I've included some of these in the budget write-up, for those of you that have read those. The technology plan is on the web. It's all available on the web, and even the approval letter is there. So we are approved and certified through, I think, June 30th, 2010, as far as the state is concerned. Having a completed and certified plan is important for things like federal funding through E-rate. If you don't have a certified plan, that you can't get federal E-rate monies. And we get, between the federal monies and the state monies, we get $20,000 to $25,000 worth of grant money per year through that. Here are some statistics that we deal with. Servers are computers that many users connect to, mail servers, web servers, file servers, those kinds of things. We're dealing with 29 servers for the town and the school, approximately 1,200 computers, 100 or so printers. When I started looking at these numbers, they were kind of staggering. Users, I picked students grades 3 through 12. We deal with them, setting them up on servers and things like that, and then all of our staff. We have 3 technicians and myself, the coordinator. If you take the 1,200 and just deal with the 3 technicians, it's approximately 400 computers per technician. Large corporations typically employ 1 support person for every 50 PCs. Now that's in a perfect world, in an ideal situation. We're a little bit above the 50 PC limit. This is our network. It's a fairly complex network. It's a diagram of our network. You can see how all of the buildings are connected together in blocks, and this is how we connect to the internet. But it is fairly complex, and again, we deal with the school and town. Everything is connected together. We've got a couple of places where we've got internet access. Town is different than school. We've got firewalls. These are all devices, electronic devices that connect everything together. And we're fortunate that we're fibered together so we can share a lot of resources. But that's, for the technical people, what it looks like. School network, it's a complex network. It's more and more services are being delivered over the network. And it's been a very tough year for us. We've had our experience. We've had several server issues. And when you have a server that, for example, one of the servers that's been giving us problems is this proxy filtering server that delivers the internet to the whole district. And if that's down, the internet's down for the whole district. And the district, by the district I mean the 3 schools and actually Thomas Memorial Library. So servers can affect many users. And sometimes when you're dealing with issues like this, it's not a simple fix. You've got to go back, you've got to try this, you've got to do other things. Another example of a real serious situation, embarrassing situation, we had Community Services has a server, and there was a hard drive that died in that server. That's the hard drive on the server, that's where all the data was. And not only did the hard drive die, but there was a backup failure. So not only did we not have the hard drive, but we didn't have the backup to restore things. And it was a real serious situation. Restoring data, the use of facilities was on there that was all filled out for much of the year, and it was really, really critical. So when these systems fail, it affects our users. You probably heard me say this before. It's not about the technology, it's about teaching and learning. And that's what we've heard. We've heard that through the Milty program. But when things don't work, it is about the technology. Okay? And, this is a quote. I put this up here from Jeff. And this was very disturbing to me personally that he was telling us this in one DLT meeting, that teachers are becoming a little reluctant to use technology because of some reliability issues. So that's a big concern. As I was putting this presentation together, I get a monthly newspaper called eSchool News, and right on the front page, this thing caught my eye. Schools need more IT support. I have a copy of the article, for the full article, if you'd like to see it. I'm going to bring up a few points about that. If anyone wants copies, they're here. This survey was conducted by a corporation, and nearly 1,000 schools and district technology leaders were surveyed through this process. One of the good things about the survey, it shows that we're not alone. Other schools are in the same boat. That still is not a good thing, but here's some things that are from the article. The biggest problem is there's too much stuff, not enough staff. As school technology use has exploded in recent years, tech support staffing hasn't kept pace. And I think that's true with us and in many school districts. Of the survey respondents, 54% of the respondents said at least half of their workload is reactive rather than proactive. I think, sometimes I think my staff and myself need to wear fire hats because it seems like we're always putting out fires and we never get to the point where we can do some proactive stuff, some planning. Many days, all we can do is keep the ship afloat. And there's no time to check our course. I thought that was good. And in fact, in one of my budget things, I talked about keeping the ship afloat in previous years. So towards a more proactive approach, as we were having some serious troubles, and actually, word got out in the community, and we had a call from a citizen, a parent, who happens to be in the computer business and the networking business, and actually offered some help. We didn't know what it was going to turn out at first, but Alan and I met with him, and we thought one of the first things we needed to do is to kind of take a little proactive approach to figure out what's going on. Ernie's got a nice system where he can look and see what's going on with the rooms. I don't have that kind of a system. My monitoring system is Jeff Shedd. He gets in early in the morning, and if something's down, I get a call from Jeff. He's my monitoring system right now, and it's cheap, doesn't cost us anything, but may not be the best situation for us to...
Point of that, please.
Although he was asking about a stipend recently. So we're looking at installing some kind of a network monitoring system. I've looked at these things in the past and they were very expensive, so money was kind of prohibitive. But this person happens to deal with networks and knew of an open source system that ran on a Linux box, and it gave us a view of the networks. It will give us some alerts. So now I can have a nice screen that's up in my office and I can take a look at it, and if I see everything's green, that's good. There's no problems happening. If there is a problem, there'll be a little red alert or there might be an orange alert. I want to thank Mark Stone, who is the citizen, the community member, the parent. He's president of Reliable Networks, and that Reliable Networks, I mean, it sounded good to us. And he deals with big networks, law firms and medical centers and those kinds of things. So here's what our system looks like right now. This is just a screenshot. It's not the live thing, but what we've done is we've kind of clustered our critical things, our servers and our networking stuff into groups. There's CEHS, the middle school community services, so I can take a look at things building-wise, and I can see that right now we're the top one up here is CEHS servers. There's 10 servers and networking things at the high school. And when I took the screenshot, 10 of them were up and everything was okay. You can look at, we've got this set up, actually a little bit more than this right now. This was from a week or so ago, where it's continuing to build the system. We're adding more things. But I can take a look at a server. In fact, Mark was here today. We set up the system to take a look at the town hall server, the one in this building. Set up to look at a bunch of different things that were going on with that server, and all of a sudden I got a little red flag that the hard drive was getting over capacity. You know, it was getting close to being full. And we took a look at things and we said, oh, we can move this over here and that frees up space. And so we knew about a problem right then and there that we wouldn't have known about without having some kind of a system like this in place. So we're trying to take a more proactive approach. The budget hopefully will help us with this. Monitoring system, probably some other staff, some new staff. And that's just my kind of brief overview of where we are. Jack, feel free to add things for whatever you'd like to. But
yeah, I'm not going to add too much, because you covered the waterfront, I think, pretty well. But I just do want to clarify something. Technology today for the schools and for the rest of the town, this technology is a platform. It's a platform for accessing resources for your educational mission and for other things. And it's not the technology itself that has any value. It's the resources out there, other parts of the country, other parts of the world that have the value. And the problem that Gary alluded to is that every access from any place in this town to any place on the internet has to go through one server that has a piece of software called Smart Filter. And its purpose is to make sure that kids don't access pornographic or other dangerous websites. And some of the recurring problems that you've seen with the school going down have been with that particular server and software failures on that Smart Filter software. Software conflicts between the filter software and the operating system. So it's getting a lot of attention right now, and hopefully you're going to see a much higher degree of reliability and robustness as time goes on. But I would make one comment. Gary's run a very lean operation, given the extent of it. And I think there has to be a little more resources put into it to make sure that things like disk backup get done in a more complete fashion than they've been able to be done in the past. That takes money. It's not a tremendous amount of money. But I think we have to make some investments to make that technology more robust and more reliable as a platform for you to access the rest of the world from.
Other questions? No? Thank you very much, Gary. Appreciate your, always enjoy your report annually, and thank you, Jack, for that additional help. Superintendent's budget overview. Alan.
As I look around the room, I see some very heavy eyes. And people are having a hard time staying with us. It is 9:30, and we still have a fairly long agenda to go through still. So I'm going to cut my statements down to a very short piece, and then on Thursday, I'll open it up to a very long piece, if you don't mind. But a couple of things I'd like to comment on as I've sat here and listened tonight. and I've listened to each of the things we've discussed and how we've discussed them. And one thing that becomes very clear to me is that we are constantly looking at the process and the procedures of running a school system. And we begin to recognize that it isn't as simple as we'd like it to be. We're running a comprehensive high school, a very small comprehensive high school, but we're trying to do the very best job we can. We're running a technology system. We're trying to do the very best job we can. We are running many systems within this system, and we have to remember that there are processes and procedures, that everything is not a magic answer that comes floating down from the sky and you plug it in and it moves ahead. The budget is a process and a procedure as far as I'm concerned. But even before I talk about that, I want to talk about another process and procedure. I've had my computer on tonight for a while and was watching it. A process and a procedure that is happening, and I can't see out the blinds right now, but there's supposedly snow coming in. I have received so far 3 emails from people in the community who said, Mr. Hawkins, please don't close school tomorrow. And so it is a process and procedure I want to talk about really briefly. There is no enormous joy to dealing with the weather in Maine. There is no predictability with the weather in Maine, except for this year, it's going to snow, and it's going to snow, and it's going to snow. And so then the process becomes that I have to look at all of the different pieces of the puzzle, and then have to make some decisions on whether school will be open tomorrow, or whether it will be closed tomorrow, or whether it will open an hour late, or whether it will open 2 hours late, or whether we'll close an hour early, or however we'll go about that. But recognizing the process and the procedures, there is one process and procedure I always look at very carefully in whatever we do, and that is what is safest for the people who are in our schools. That is our students, and that is the adults. And so when I think about process and procedure, I think about it from that perspective. The last time I closed school, I got I got one very nasty email and one that was a little less nasty. But I do need to say, while I'm in front of the cameras, that I don't make these decisions arbitrarily. I look at all of the possibilities and we make the decisions from there. And at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, I will receive a phone call that will let me know where we are, and from that information, we'll make a decision. That's a process and a procedure to run the school system. So when I look at everything we do, we have to remember it is a part of a picture, a big picture, of a school system whose product is educating young people and doing it the very best way we can. So this week, on Friday, after a great deal of work by my business manager, by the leadership team within the school system, we finally have put together my superintendent's proposed budget for 2008 and 2009. I think it's really interesting if you look at the cover. Somebody had the audacity a couple years ago to put my picture on the cover, and I said, never again. So what they put on here instead was what we think about with schools, and all those words and all those phrases and all those pieces to the puzzle. But basically, I want to say to you very clearly, and I want the public to understand, this budget from the superintendent, and it is the superintendent's budget at this point, is very different than what it's been in the last few years. In the last few years, I have been faced with an understanding that I had to keep the budget at a certain level of spending. And so I would build that budget accordingly. And it was usually based on a CPI level. It was an average for 1 year. This year, when we came into the budget, I didn't hear that from the town council. I didn't hear that from you, and I thank you for not doing that. But I heard a different message. I heard a message saying, let us not look at a budget as a cutting piece, but look at a budget as far as what our schools really do need. And we sat in meetings as a board, and we passed out sheets, and we talked about some of the concerns you have as board members, and we talked about some of the concerns the administration has, and what you asked me to do is to direct them in a manner so that they built a budget that truly reflected what the school system needs. That is what you have in this book. It is not a budget based on a CPI level. It is not a budget based on cost of living increases. It is a budget on what we see is needed. During the next couple of 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, really, we will be going through this budget in a step-by-step process. I mentioned earlier when the dates will be, and I hope citizens will come to our meetings. But one of the things that I need to make very clear to the citizens, as well as remind you, we will not be going into a meeting where I ask each of the principals, and I ask the curriculum director, and I ask the technology director, and each one of them to get up and give their report. They have given their report in here, and in this budget you will find a section which is very, very well written by each of my leadership team. They thought long and hard about what they put in here. They thought long and hard about the information they needed to give to you because they weren't doing oral presentations. What I have asked you to do is to go from there as board members and to write your questions down, your initial questions. It isn't a cheat sheet you're making for us, but you need to realize that when we come into our meetings, we come in with tons of information, but you may ask for more, and we like to come in with that information and be well prepared. So we will be doing that for the next 3 budget hearings and possibly more as you work your way through the process of looking at what did the superintendent give us and what do we want it to look like as we take it out to the town council. And at this point in time, for the first time because of legislation, we will probably be taking it from the town council to the citizens of Cape Elizabeth to vote on this budget. So we have some really, really hard work ahead of us. In this budget, I have given you a 6-page overview, which I will go over more clearly on Thursday night. I would have gone over it tonight a little more clearly, but I feel time is of the essence and we have so many things left to do. But I think what I want to make clear is this is a process and a procedure. My piece of the process and the procedure is to work with the administrative team under the guidance from the board to build a budget process that is called the superintendent's budget. This does not go to the town council as the final budget. You will come to a point, hopefully by March 11th of 2008, where you will have turned the budget into the school board's budget. That will be redone. Pauline smiles a little when she hears that because she knows how tight the dates are. And then we will go to the town council and present this budget at that point in time. So from a process and procedural look at this budget, I ask you to look at it carefully. It is not done as a comedy act. It is done as serious information to you about what we see is needed in our system. It is done with the understanding that it will probably be difficult to look at everything in here and say in 2008 and 2009 that will happen. This full budget is much, much higher than it has ever been before, but is also answering the requests that you have made of me and of the DLT. The DLT has worked very hard. When I sit in meetings with them, and I've done it several times, they'll look at me and they'll say, what do you want me to cut? And I'll say nothing, because the board has told me they want to see what you have to say. Common practice in the past was that the superintendent would talk with the board, with the DLT, would go through this, would make some cuts before it even came to you as a superintendent's budget. That has not been done. So there is some interesting work to proceed with in the next few weeks. Interesting discussions. Interesting insight into our school system. And so I know that we will have to do, by our policies and procedures, work as a team together to make this happen. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when the public comes into these meetings, we will be set in a large square. It will be the board and the DLT together. It will be the opportunity to ask questions, to discuss issues, to gather more information, to ask what the thinking is, to ask what your priorities are, to ask where we're going. And so I say this very clearly because I want the public to understand. This is not a budget built on the craziness of the superintendent who wants to spend much, much money. It is a budget proposal to the board based on what you really need to see about your school system, whether it be technology and what's happening there, whether it be in whatever area, and how those all come together to make a school system that works and provides the best education possible. So with that, I'm not going to say any more about this, but I will look forward to Thursday night. I am guaranteed there's no snow on Thursday, so I won't have to worry about closing school, and that we will be able to work our way through this process for the first step as we move ahead, and just to see where we go in the next few weeks to develop a final budget, the school board's budget, to go to the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Mr.
Jeff?
Hawkins, I can assure you that the senior class is grateful for every single snow day that you call.
And I know they always are. And I wouldn't even dare talk about adding days to the senior year, believe me.
I know a few sophomores that are enjoying that as well, but we'll leave that alone. Jeff, oops. Oh, sorry, I'm a little bleary-eyed. The NEASC accreditation, did you want to speak briefly to that?
You know, it's kind of funny, and I feel weird kind of saying this, but until I looked at the budget, the agenda for tonight, and saw the attachment, I hadn't seen that letter.
Oh, you had?
No, I knew it was coming. The only thing I can guess is we recently did reshuffle all the mailboxes in our main office, so I'm wondering if it ended up in somebody else's. I had talked to Janet Allison, and she indicated that it was coming, but it was a pleasant surprise.
You arrived a week ago, so I assumed you were well.
And it was addressed to you.
I looked through things on my desk. My office is not absolutely clean, but I know pretty much where things are, and I'm surprised I missed that, because I had alerted my secretary a couple weeks ago, if we get anything from NEASC, I want to see it in front and center on my desk, and it didn't show up. So it was good. We have been on warning status for the last year and a half or so, and we're now off warning status, and I'm glad to report that's the result of a lot of work on the part of the staff, particularly in the area of curriculum, and writing rubrics, and doing some very valuable common work. I know it's late. I'm not going to say anything more than that unless somebody has any questions, but I'm very happy about that.
Good job and congratulations.
Yes. Wonderful. I know you worked hard to get those things resolved, so thank you. Comprehensive plan implementation update.
Yes.
Alan?
You have a letter in your packet which is dated January 22nd, 2008 from Mike McGovern, the town manager. And what it is doing basically is, as you know, they recently accepted a new comprehensive plan for Cape Elizabeth. And what the town manager is asking is for me to come to the school board to implement step number 33, which follows: to develop a model and generate updated school enrollment projections that accurately reflect the influence of in-migration and assess, excuse me, I'm getting late, how school facilities will support projected school enrollment. So what I bring this to you for is to help me make decisions on how you want me to do this. Prior to this, you had hired a company to come in and do that report, which we have used several years in a row, which has created, if I'm not mistaken, and I put it in quotes, some frustration. And so I need some guidance from you as far as what you would like me to do in order to look at this. It says that we should accomplish this by the end of 2008.
Could we take a look at maybe checking out a couple of companies in terms of what they could do and their cost? I mean to interrupt you, Rebecca. You were about to say something.
That was it?
That was it. Great minds.
And is this cost in our budget?
No. This just came on January 22nd. I had no idea it was coming, so there is nothing in our budget that reflects it.
It might be good to know what it roughly will cost us.
Is that all right with the board? Have Alan do some research on that?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Alan, again, update on consolidation.
Yes. you have in your packet a document that looks like this, that is a message around consolidation as far as what is going on. If you remember correctly, several of us went to a state meeting here in Westbrook to talk about consolidation. And so there are many, 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 many steps going on. I think the most important thing, and I look at Dom down there because he's been involved with some of these. I'm not asking you to speak, but he's been involved with some of these. There are a lot of acts going through the legislature right now at different levels, talking about changes within the comprehensive plan. Some of those changes are, for instance, there is some question of whether there will have to be a vote in the spring by the citizens as far as accepting the budget. There are other pieces that reflect upon special education law. There are other pieces that reflect on other components of the plan. So many of those components affect other districts more than they do us, that combine as school systems. But my basic message to you is this. I'm watching this carefully. I hear daily from Augusta and hear daily about what is going on. This act, which is an act regarding curriculum requirements and standards for a high school diploma, is one that is coming through the department. The department is having hearings on this. There was a hearing in Westbrook. There have been several other hearings. There are some that have been canceled because of weather, but will be coming along. And basically what they're looking at is what will it look like as far as curriculum requirements and standards. Originally, this bill was supposed to go through the legislature this year. My understanding is now the purpose is to gather the data and then go from there. And I did give each of you on the board the website so you could go in and take a look at the video by the commissioner and look at what she had to say and also respond to that if you would like. Give your response as far as how you feel about this bill and what it would mean to Cape Elizabeth High School and the education your students are getting. So those are the basic things that are happening, and I am trying to send to you on a as-received basis information about what is going on. The biggest worry I have right now, the greatest worry is, we received word the other day, which I think I sent on to all of you from the commissioner, that they are not at the point of deciding our EPS formula, Essential Programs and Services, which therefore means that we do not know what, at this point, we will be receiving, if anything, from the state because of now the $200 million shortage of funds within the state level. We are also unsure of whether we will receive our June subsidy payment and or whether that will be held because, again, of financial problems. So to me, right now, there are two major problems. Number one is funding from the state, and number two is the vote of the spring and how that's going to look. And I continue to listen daily to see what the updates are going to be on that as we move ahead.
Alan, I have a question.
Yes.
I had the honor of looking at the PowerPoint presentation, and there were quite a lot of number of specifics about various areas of the curriculum that we would be required to meet. But I could not find that language in any of the actual law. Is there actual language or not?
Jeff and I went to the meeting the other day, and Jeff is doing just what I was going to say. There is nothing at this point. This
So
is new
it's just
law.
It's just her PowerPoint and a reference to the fact that there will be standards.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And I will tell you, in all fairness, the amount of frustration at that meeting, although there were only about 25 of us there, the amount of frustration there was very, very high. And of the 25 or 30 that were there, 5 people were from Cape Elizabeth. So we were well represented by Connie Goldman and members of the group, including Jeff and myself. I was the only superintendent who attended. And so the frustration level, Rebecca, is very high as we work our way through this. And my understanding is they are getting very negative reports from each place they meet with.
Okay.
Ellen, I mentioned it. I did what, in fact, I went through the PowerPoint. I also, actually, I hate to admit it, I watched the video, Commissioner and she mentioned the language requirement for 2012. I don't see it written anyplace. It wasn't in the PowerPoint.
Nope.
In fact, foreign language, the words are not even in here.
No, it isn't.
So I don't know what's happening. I mean, it's confusing. That was an address she gave last night to be distributed, and all of a sudden she's announcing this new requirement for 2012.
And to be very honest with you, that is the constant reports we get back, is that there are things that are suddenly thrown on the table that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And so when you made that comment earlier, I thought to myself, that's supposedly coming from this report, yet it isn't in that report.
No, it was in her talk
Yep.
last night.
Yep. So it's a difficult time, very difficult time in education in Maine. There's no two ways about it.
Peter, did you want to add something?
On February 29th, the State of Maine Office of Economic Forecasting will be submitting their final numbers as to what is the shortfall. Based on information I've received, that shortfall is going to be over $300 million.
Okay.
And the only cut the governor has come up with so far that amounts to any money is he's cut by 35% the daily stipend for the care of foster children. So education is not sacred.
No.
And it's my worry. I'm not trying to be a chicken little and say the sky is falling, but I have a very deep concern that we don't have all the information. I mean, it's been delayed and given to us piecemeal, and that's just another form of lying as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you can't get honest figures out of the state, but on the 29th, we should at least have a forecasting figure.
Thank you, Peter.
No handle.
Okay. Legislative review, that was sort of it.
That was
as
really
well.
that as well.
CEF update. Karen, do you want to add anything on the CEF update?
I mean, other than the meeting that we had with
Yeah.
Kevin Thomas and Peter Carey, which I thought went very well, and we had another opportunity to discuss how we want to work together in the future. I thought it was very productive, and we were at the CEF meeting last night. Alan and I were at the beginning, and we have another grant cycle that's coming up that we'll be reviewing. I'm being part of the grant committee, acting as a liaison, that will be taking place the end of March. So we encourage all of the administrators to encourage their teachers and other faculty and staff to come forward with any requests they might have that would fall outside the school budget and be innovative, especially in current budgetary times that we're in. The more grants, the better they have money to help us with. And Alan, I don't know if you or Kathy wanted to add to that.
The only thing I'm going to add to it is they have finally come to the point where they have an office.
Right.
And they have somebody in the office who is coordinating their paperwork. They are absolutely thrilled. They're finding it working very well. I heard them report that last night. But it is also making work much better, more organized than it has been before. And I think that's a very important piece to this. And I cannot compliment the joint presidency of CEF enough for the work that they have done with us in the last month and a half, I guess it is, in order to begin to coordinate the entire program.
Great. Unfinished business. Trish, consideration of policies for second reading?
Yeah, we have 4 policies tonight. We have policy JG, student placement within the schools and all the accompanying administrative guidelines for each of the schools, Pond Cove, middle school, high school. Actually, I guess it's only 2 policies. The 4 listings are including the administrative guidelines. So I'd like to move that we approve policy JG, student placement within the schools, and the accompanying guidelines as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
The second policy for second reading is ACAA, which is harassment and sexual harassment of students. And I'd like to move that we approve this policy as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Rebecca. Discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, we've done TED. Consideration and action to approve the PATHS budget.
You have in your packets 2 pages from an analysis of PATH's cost for Part 1 and Part 2 budget. This is the one that you will remember that is presented each year by the representative of PATH's. If you look at this, it talks about the school systems that particularly participate in the PATH program at this point in time, including Bonnie Eagle, Cape Elizabeth, Falmouth, and so on. If you look down this, you will see that Cape Elizabeth, which is second on the list alphabetically, what they use is older data each year in order to create their data for funding. It shows that in October of '05, we had 13 students there. You look down through, you have the smallest number of students in the group who attend PAS. In 1006, we had 9 students there, which when averaged together shows that we have an average attendance over that 2-year period of 11 students. Therefore, we are responsible for 1.8% of their budget. Their Part 1 budget is their budget that is used to operate the system, and that is the $47,086.44. Their Part 2 budget is for things that are new and changing at PAS, and our budget in that is $2,607.64. So our entire charge with PAS for 0809 is $49,694.08, which, if I remember correctly, from the figures that Pauline gave you in the budget, is down approximately $6,000? $20,000. Sorry about that.
60,000
Yes.
something last
So it
year.
has dropped by $20,000. We always like to hear something drop. So what I'm seeking tonight is approval to commit to the $49,694.08. It is a program that, although we do not have an enormous number of students attending, what they get out of that program is extremely important to them.
Question, Ellen?
Yes.
I'm new to this. I was wondering, is there any trend as far as the number of students that we send there?
What I see is the trend, and I look to Jeff if I'm misquoting, but my sense is we do not get a large number of students who ever attend there, mainly because the type of programs that are offered, much what they need they can get at Cape Elizabeth High School. And so that when these students are choosing these programs, they're choosing programs that have specific work expertise in them to help train them. And Jeff, am I way off on that or not?
No, I don't think you're way off. I would just add this. I mean, this PAS is where scheduling does significant, I mean, the biggest impact is the schedule. And the fact
I was trying to be careful of that.
and the influence of transportation. That in order to attend PAS, kids have to drive across Portland, and they have to be there for an entire half day. A lot of kids, even though they could benefit enormously, even more than they do from the PAS program, there are relatively few who are willing to commit that much time, whether it's because of academic pressures or expectations at home or whatever it might be. There's some wonderful, wonderful programs there, but that's a big commitment of time for kids.
Is there a trend, Jeff, as far as kids from here more or less going there?
I mean, it's been pretty steady over the last several years until this dropped, so I don't see it as a long-term trend, but the numbers have always been relatively low. I think big users of the PAS system are the kids in our life skills program with some of the hospitalities programs that they have, and those numbers are on the wane, and I think you're seeing that. That's largely the driving force, I think.
Aside from scheduling complexity, what's your own feeling? Are there enough kids taking advantage of those opportunities? Or?
I mean, there's a lot to offer there. There's some wonderful programs. There's some wonderfully demanding programs that lead to wonderful jobs. It would be great to have more kids be able to attend, but it's a systemic issue that's across the state. It affects a school like Cape Elizabeth High School particularly heavily, I think, and probably others that are where there's a fairly high degree of affluence and a really high degree of expectations. It's a systemic problem with the way vocational education is done in Maine, I think.
Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
I'd like to move that we accept the PATHS budget for the Cape Elizabeth assessment as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Trish. Discussion? No? All in favor? 7-0. Consideration and action to approve superintendent's recommendations for administrators' contract renewals for 2008 and 2009.
What you have in front of you is a document which lists the administrators who have been evaluated and who will be continuing. I am recommending for continuation in 0809. They are specifically Steve Conley at the middle school. This is the end of Steve's third year. Am I correct on that? Yes, third year. And so he moves into a permanent position there. Tom Eismeyer from Pond Cove, who has many more than 3 years, but I won't ask him how many. Jeff Shedd at the high school. The 2 assistant principals, John Casey at the middle school and Troy Henninger, who is finishing up his second year. And the district-wide is Paulina Portria, Dominic DePatsy, Gary Lanoy, and Sarah Simmons. I have a great opportunity to evaluate each one of them in many different ways. I work with them regularly. I talk with them regularly. Some people may feel like I talk with them more regularly than they want to, but we talk a lot. I do evaluate them. I do, as a matter of fact, I have just finished another round of interviews with them, and I'm in the process of writing their evaluations, which hopefully will be in their hands right after the February break. These people do challenging work for us. They are excellent administrators. They deal with a broad range of needs in the school system. And I think from my perspective, I'm very proud to have each and every one of them working with me. And I hope you see it the same, because they are solid administrators here in Cape Elizabeth. I should mention, there are 2 people missing off this list. Their names are Keith Weatherby and Sue Weatherby. And I did not put them on here because, as you know, they will not be continuing another year unless I can talk them out of their resignation, which doesn't look like I'm going to be able to.
Thank you, Alan. I'd like to move that we accept Alan's administrator nominations for employment contract renewal for the year 2008-2009. Thank you, Jack. Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. And Alan, this actually reminds me that you had a consideration of leave of absence that we need to also deal with. So I
move that we accept the leave of absence as presented by
Ogden Williams.
Ogden Williams. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Second.
Thank you, Linda. Discussion?
I don't want him to go next year. Can he wait one more year?
I believe that was a statement.
That was a question.
To believe that.
It was a question? Okay.
At the end.
Anything else? All in favor?
Reluctant.
7-0. Reluctantly. Okay. Consideration of change in high school co-curricular fee position for 2007-2008.
The one request you have from Jeff is for yearbook advisor. And as you know, Rachel has left the school system, and we need somebody to step in to finish up the yearbook. And so he has recommended Roz Gross, did I say that right? Who is also taking Rachel's place. And so what will happen is basically that she will transfer into that position and will receive the half year of money that has not been spent to finalize the 2008 yearbook. Wow, doesn't seem possible.
I move that we approve the change in the high school co-curricular fee position around yearbook as presented by the superintendent.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Second.
Thank you, Trish. Discussion, questions? All in favor? 7-0. Okay. Consideration of policies for first reading.
Yeah, we have several policies in the East section which deal with safety. And a thank you to the Safety Committee for looking at those. The policies, the Policy Committee is presenting for first reading are Policy EB, which is the safety program, Policy EBAA, which is chemical hazards, Policy EBCA, which is critical incident crisis response plan, and Policy EBCC, which is bomb threats.
I have a question. Is there any consideration for grouping like the critical incident and bomb threats together? It seems like we have a bunch of separate policies, and I'm wondering if we, if there's some savings by putting some of these potentially together.
We could certainly look at that. I think some of these policies are required by law. I don't know whether they need to be specific, but that's certainly something that the Policy Committee will look at.
I know we've talked about trying to eliminate policies when possible. And so, you know, one minute we have a bomb threat policy, and then we might have a terrorist policy, and we might have a, there could be something else that we haven't even thought about in terms of some kind of a threat, and maybe there's a more of an umbrella thing that would cover any potential threats today or in the
Yep.
future, so.
We can look into that. I know specifically, like, for example, we need a separate pandemics policy, which one would consider to be a critical incident, but we have to have a separate policy for that, so we can certainly, we can look into that.
I figured there's probably a reason, but I figured I'd ask anyway.
Yep, no, that's something we can check out.
Other questions for Trish? No? Okay, committee reports. I think I'll do it like I did before. Does anybody feel that they would like to say something specific? Yes, about their committee?
Yep, just very briefly. The Finance Committee met on January 23rd, and we're having some growing concern around the food services program. It's continuing to reflect a negative balance, and it grew to $30,000, whereas last year at this time was roughly $18,000. The food service computer program does have the capability to issue reports on food sold, so Sue is going to be doing an analysis on that and bringing it to the Finance Committee. There was concern around energy reports, so we asked Ernie if he would come and speak to us tonight. There's also continuing concern about our end-of-year balance and what that's going to look like. And then we had also heard about the computer system issues, and I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you, Rebecca. Trish, yep.
It's sort of this calendar committee, which comes under the policy committee. The calendar committee has been working really hard on spending a lot of time on some changes, and there, I hope, will be a draft of the calendar committee's proposal at this point on the website, maybe by the end of this week, if not by the beginning of the week after vacation, and we would encourage people to look at that and send any comments to us. Next year is had some challenges in the budget, in the calendar. It's a presidential election year in the way that the December holidays fall. So we hope to bring that proposal to the school board for their approval in March, but definitely April.
Okay, great. Thank you. Others? Linda?
I actually just wanted to make more or less a commentary based on last night's town council meeting having to do with the Hannaford Field and the passing of their motion for support of the bleachers and the town's contribution through the upcoming bond issue. There were comments made by most of the town council members, some of which I would like to actually make a correction on this evening. One in particular had to do with, this has been an ongoing issue for everybody here in town for about a year now. Initially, the school board was asked just about a year ago for us to provide our input as far as our support for bleachers at Hannaford Field. At that point in time, we had no documentation, no proposal, no specifics on what we were looking at, they were asking for our opinion on. At that point in time, the school board did refrain from providing any type of opinion. And last night, there was a point made that we had rejected the idea of the bleachers at that point in time. As we all lived through the controversy that erupted from there. So they did reform the Hannaford Field Committee, of which I am a member. Did a lot of work on that committee this past fall. Brought a proposal from the Hannaford Field Committee to the school board with the appropriate documentation and materials so that we could all have our discussion and make an informed decision, which we did. And we have passed on to the town council. I was very glad to hear a lot of their discussion because I listened very carefully last night from home. And was very glad to see that they did indeed pass the proposal as we supported it. But I just wanted to make that commentary this evening to kind of clarify our position on the bleachers at Hannaford Field.
Thank you, Linda. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think the rest of the board appreciates, the chronological order and how that took place. So, and it's important that the public also hear that as well. Other committees? Jack, we were sort of going through, and if you had something to say about one of your committees, you could, and if you don't want to, that's fine too.
Not really.
Okay, great. I mean, not great, but fine. Public comment. I can't remember, this is on non-agenda, no, this is on agenda items? I don't see any. School board agenda requests. Anybody? Nope. Announcement of upcoming meetings. They're listed, and I did receive an email from Andrea clarifying that the Communications Committee is working on rescheduling the meeting currently listed on the agenda as being on March 3rd. This is due to a conflict with the next Wellness Committee meeting, which will be on March 3rd. The school board workshop scheduled for March 4th has been scheduled to be held in the high school library. This is also currently on the website. And so all these meetings are posted on the website, Andrea has indicated. So if you see anything that's incorrect, let her know. Otherwise, I think we're all set. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
No, take your time. No discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone.